we found the aircraft nose down. I don't know how I did it, kind of sort of come around in a half loop and just hit the water nose down. And I remember pulling the doors off and there was 2 blokes in there. And as I pulled the pilot, it was a bit of a rattle, but he was dead, basically. And occasionally unmarked DC-3 would land there. And little Montaguards would trickle out, and then they trickle back on and take off again. That was the CIA, the Invisible Air Force. No markings at all, just a grey DC-3. Yeah, it was, helicopter, great aircraft. I used to love flying them, but you're a sitting duck. You're just floating around somewhere up in the sky. If you're down low, especially. It didn't take much, a couple of shots through the engine, get the smoke rising and controls going haywire. So I had my own private feelings. But when at the time I went to Vietnam, I knew I had to go, and I was happy to go and see we're doing the right thing, for whatever the right thing may be at the time. So born in Melbourne, early years I think were in Essendon. My dad came from Essendon, mum was from Kew.
Okay, so just going back to recruitment, what happened, how long did it take before you were advised you were in? Or did that happen very quickly? When you were told that you were accepted?
I probably did the test December, it might have been about early December I think, because I probably got notified about January and I was in February when February started. So I think it was late 67, might have been November, December. I remember going into town, not telling anyone and getting through and then coming back and eventually getting accepted and then coming back and telling I was resigning during the Air Force. And I think one of the women, Gail, said, I thought you'd be going in. I said, I had a feeling you wouldn't be staying here. I don't know whether I talked about it or not, but I probably had a month's notice. So went down to Spencer Street to what was called the RTO, was a Services Rail Transport Office. Got the ticket, jumped on the train on my own, overnight to Adelaide. I think we got picked up by a bus and then driven out to Edinburgh, RAAF Base Edinburgh, which is outside Elizabeth. And the first weekend we arrived, within a week there used to be a bit of Air Force civilian stuff going on, and a few of the boys had got bashed up. Air Force blokes, because in summer we had the army slouch hats, and so you had a chin strap. So a couple of days in the sun and suntan, and you get a bit of marks. So they knew you were in the Air Force, because you had short hair, and you'd often have this chin strap stuff. And a few of the boys got into a fight, so the whole base was ready to march in. Everyone got confined to base. Not ready to go in and just take everybody out on the street. The gates were shut. No leave this weekend. Everyone stays on base. So that was good.
So can you tell me more about life at Edinburgh, what you were trained in? And
well, again, drill, marching, so everyone's got to follow a particular way of moving around. You march around, you march around in flights, parades, drills. So we would produce, if you knew how to do parades and stuff, so for Anzac Day or whatever may be happening, they'd take a section out. Not that we did in Edinburgh, it was more in Sydney when I was at RAAF Base Richmond, we did a lot more. And rifle shooting, Harrier rifle, camping, going out to the range to shoot. What else was there? Some lessons on nuclear and biological warfare stuff. General service life, RAAF service life, RAAF military rules. Basic training, a lot of drill stuff, carrying rifles, runs, getting fit, running in a group, supporting each other. If someone runs short, you get away from him, you go back and get him. You don't leave him on his own. Just basically getting fit, which was good. 3 meals a day. And I can remember that it was also the same area for the recruitment for the RAAFs, the WAFs. And it was pretty strict then. Like, they're over on that side of the mesh, you don't go over that side of the mesh, you don't even look at them. It was really weird. And so there was couple of old corporals, they really enforced you didn't stand around checking them out and talking to them. But you got to meet them after hours. And there's actually a girl who would come from Noble Park, which is next to Dandenong North. So I got friendly with her, and actually her mum came over for her passing out parade. And I remember going back to the parents' motel and we having a drink, and got to know a couple in that way, sort of thing. And I remember we had our passing out parade, and one of the blokes played bagpipes. So and there was him and a drum, I think, and we had bagpipes on our parts in our parade. It was just, I love them. I just love bagpipes, and we had this bagpipe going. It was just amazing. Bring rain that morning, so the parade ground was wet, and the boots were all shining, the white webbing, and we looked pretty good actually. I remember Mum and Dad not coming across. I was pretty disappointed. All I had to do was have to jump on a train, stay in a motel, go home again. Didn't come. A lot of parents made the effort, but that was fine. Then we went out, because in Adelaide you couldn't drink, you had to be 21. That was a whole 17 and a half. So we went out to the local pub, didn't we? In a little back room to celebrate. And we're drinking rum, and I'd had an occasional shandy at home. That was about all. And I was drinking rum and coke that night and sculling. And I remember coming home in the taxi, and the bloke said, "If you get any sick, you stick your head out that window." I did. I didn't touch rum after that. I was a bit crook that night. And then we got a train to Dan home to start again. Got a train to Melbourne, so I was dropped in and saw Mum and Dad. And that night travelled off to Sydney, then stayed in Sydney for a day, then got a train up to Queensland and off to Amberley. Then we spent about 4 or 5 months in Amberley.
So how long was the basic training at Edinburgh?
February, March, April. Easter's April, isn't it? So it must have been about 3.5 months, yeah. Because I remember kind of the break in between, well, towards the end, that's when it was Easter. Saved up my money because, what were we getting a fortnight? It was some huge amount, like, I don't know, $170 a fortnight or something. I thought I was rich, absolutely rich. All this money coming in. So I saved up money and flew home for Easter, which was great. Fantastic. Flew home in the uniform and chatting up the air hostess. Yeah, life was pretty good then. I loved it. I loved the Air Force. I loved the time. In fact, years later, I remember thinking, I've had enough of civilian life. I've had enough of trying to work for myself. I'm going back on the service. This is my way out. But it was, so it was about 3.5, 4 months, and then we went to Edinburgh for about the same. to Amberley for about the same time. So that was when things got lifted up. So with more weapons training, ambush patrol work, getting a lot fitter, climbing ropes, which I'd never done before. That was a whole new thing. I remember climbing up a rope, and we had to climb a vertical rope, then go along a horizontal. So there's a trick to doing that. And I remember swinging around and falling off the rope and swearing. He says, "Well, you can't do that to rope, and get up back up the rope and climb it again." And a lot of gun work. So we would train very similar to Army in weapons handling. So the airfields have always had the Airfield Defence Guard component. Even the Second World War, they were known as differently, and they were trained similar to the Army then. There's a whole story about how they were trained, and Army blokes come in and run it and all that sort of stuff. So the ADIs, or Airfield Defence, has always been there to protect the airfield. But now I believe they actually train the personnel as well on the military base, or the RAAF base, how to be involved in that aspect. They don't just rely solely on Airfield Defence Guards. So the military personnel, or the RAAF personnel, also get trained in weapons handling and know how to go out and to protect the airbase as well. But the airfield, that's the major aspect of the Airfield Defence Guard. It's aircraft and airfield and personnel security. So that can mean, going out patrols or maintaining the perimeter and checking people coming in and off and all that sort of stuff.
So what sort of weapons were you trained in?
What's called SLRs, self-loading rifle, which is about 9.5 pound, was the weapon they had for a long time. And the Army have them as well. SLR 1s, and was a 2, which was sort of a semi-automatic one. That used to sort of jam up a bit, so you had to then check the safety and adjust the gas pressure, but it used to jam up. It had a heavier barrel, so it was more of an automatic. M60s, which you see still being used, that was a fully automatic weapon. You might see shots of Rambo standing there with it tucked under his arm, which we got to do on a firing range, and it's fantastic. So that's fully automatic. Pistols, little F1 submachine guns. What else do we have? Rocket launchers, but we never got to actually use them. But we know how to dismantle and utilise them, but we never. I think we might have used them once, but did not actually use them in Vietnam. What other weapons? While we're in Vietnam, we set up of Claymore mines. We set them up while we're out patrol.
You were trained how to do that?
Yeah.
At Amberley?
Yep. Yep.
What's a claymore mine?
It's a compact explosive full of ball bearings, and it's slightly convex, shaped that way. Little legs, detonator goes in, and you set up so it blasts out that way. And there's a certain range behind you. You set it up, so you don't want to be sitting from here to you when it goes off. You set it up a bit, obviously away from you when it goes off. Which reminds me of an incident when we were out on patrol, because our section did an exchange with the Army when I was in Vietnam. So a section of Army come down from Nui Dat to RAAF base Vung Tower and did airfield security. And we went up and did 2 weeks up there, so we did reorientation, went out on patrol, did ambush and stuff. And I remember going out in a patrol, and for some reason we had a CMF officer with us on exchange. And we set the ambush up, and he had this thing set up in front of a sapling this big, and we went, that's not safe enough. And we weren't that far back from it, and I'm thinking, this is not looking good. So, yeah, it wasn't nothing would happen that night, but it was like, oh, I don't think he knows what he's doing.
So what sort of targets were you firing at in your training at Ambley?
At the firing range were either the bullseye targets, usually, or they'd have a man-shaped target. So you'd start from, let me think, we started from, well, far back as 500 yards, but usually it was 100 yards. So you'd 100 yards to set your weapon in, then you might move up to 75, then you might move up to 25, and then you might change the pistol at 25. So you would take turns, running the bullseye or the targets up and down, checking where they fought, where the bullet landed, sort of thing. So you got to use all the weapons at the time, and also practicing to make sure you hit the flaming target as well. And the blokes who got really good, when we come back, we got posted to the RAAF base Richmond, there was a thing called the Long Bay Rifle Shoot, which was a inter-service shoot. So the blokes were really good with going those competitions, which I didn't. I was average. Maybe need more practice. But it was interesting. The way of lying, the way of handling the weapons. Got taught how to move through patrols, what to do if there was an ambush, what weapons to take, take the high ground. Which all this stuff keeps coming back. It's really weird, isn't it? You never forget it. A bit like riding a bike, I guess. Once you've ridden a bike, or you know how to swim, you don't forget how to swim, sort of thing. All that sort of stuff. And at Ambley, we went out on night patrols and bivouacs and what they call a lantern stalk. So they've a lantern set up and they'd be protected by blokes. Then you'd have to try and get up as close as possible without being detected.
What's a lantern stalk?
Oh, you'd have a lantern. We wouldn't so much have a lamp. We might have a light in the middle of a patch, and half the blokes would be set up as a protection around it. And you'd be sent off in the bush, and you have to work your way up as close as possible before being detected. So, it'd be scrub bush stuff, and they do things like you might sprinkle dry grass leaves or a lot of dry twigs, or another trick is to tie grass together to form a catch, like a little loop in the grass. So as you go through, you might catch a leg and trip if you're walking. Besides relying on twigs and grass, which is the normal stuff, or hanging up empty cans, you get a long grass and tie a couple of knots in it, so it forms a loop, so you'd walk and you'd fall over. You wouldn't even see it, especially at night time. Tricks of the trade, I think they call it. What else was there? We did once I'd gone back to RAAF base Richmond, they eventually sent you out on a search and rescue. So if you were in aircraft, there's a escape evasion stuff for military. All the military would do it, so mostly aircrew. So the first week is a lot of theory, how to pack a backpack using a parachute and rations, and then they'd send you out in groups of 3, and I was with an Army pilot and a RAAF pilot, and I was in the hinterland at the back of the Gold Coast. So 3 nights you have to camp out, live off rations, and the ADGs from the RAAF base would come out and search for you. So if you got caught 3 times, you'd have to do the course again. We got caught once, and they let you go. And we were laying there watching these blokes walk along patrol, think, we've got them covered. And the blokes walked up behind us. You're dead. So we got caught once. And then there was a major bivouac area. We stayed for a couple of nights and set up sort of a teepee using a parachute. And it was freezing cold, absolutely freezing cold in the hinterland. Slept in our greens. We slept all together, had a parachute on top of us, had a fire going, made hot chocolate from the rations. And It was good, but by God, we were hungry when we got back to base.
So why were you carrying parachutes if you're out on a...
Oh, well, if the theory being if you don't have a parachute drop, you keep your parachute to pack your stuff up, but the parachute you used is one way of forming a backpack, so you had to make it out of bits of wood. So they had, when I say wood, like saplings, so you had to learn how to tie to make a backpack and use the parachute as part of that backpack, for want of a better word. Mine didn't last too long, but yeah, that's what you had to do. You had to utilise what you could to carry your rations if you had rations and somehow you had no ration pack or whatever, and carried other stuff with you. We found some wild bananas, found some freshwater crays one day in a creek. But yeah, I remember going back to base and we were getting a beer on the way back, and one beer and we were all cactus. I hadn't drunk for 2 weeks, I think. So the tummy was a bit small and we were a bit hungry and hadn't had a drink, so it was interesting. Yeah, it was good. Escape and evasion stuff. Everyone had to learn that sort of stuff. So yeah, all the aircrew had to do it. Yeah.
Were you being trained specifically for Vietnam at that stage?
Oh, we knew we'd go to Vietnam. We were told, that was one of the initial things we were told when we joined the Airfield Defence Guard, you could get a posting overseas and that would include in Vietnam. And went, yeah, okay, I'll go. Crazy. Oh, whole 18 and a half. Yeah, that's all right, I'm fine, I'll go. But some of our blokes had already gone to Ubon in Thailand, because the RAAF had Canberras flying out there, but also the Yanks had Phantoms and stuff flying out there. And they went there in the 66, 67, I think. But they weren't amongst the action, so to speak. So we had blokes at Vung Tau, which was a mixed air base. There was the Americans there as well. And we also had blokes at Phang Rank, which was up country again. And they had the Yanks and the Vietnamese and the Koreans there. It was a big air base. So we had Airfield Defence Guards there. They did patrols around the base. We looked after the airfield security through the main gate and the gate entrance to our compound, and security in the airfield at night, so around the perimeter. And we actually ended up providing an extra gunner if you wanted to go on the helicopter. You could become a gunner on the bush rangers. So I went up for a little while and kept getting airsick, which annoyed the hell out of me. And the bloke said, oh, you'll be right, you just have a throw up, throw up your hat or just throw up out the door. But I went, no, I just can't think. If I knew about ginger tablets then, I would have been popping ginger tablets. And I think, it's going to sound weird, knowing what I know now, and that's a whole other story, I think I was being looked after. It wasn't my time to go up because we lost a chopper not long after that. And the bloke had only been up like a week flying. He got shot up. So I think I was being looked after, as much as I wanted to fly. But I went up occasionally with a mate for a flight sort of thing, a couple of times. Fly up early in the morning, they'd go up to Nui Dat and sit there until they got called out, and we'd go up for the day and come back. But I was at mostly airfield work sort of thing, and doing patrols, and for 2 weeks patrols, and then night work on the base. And what else? We'd go into town at night for curfew and pick the blokes up out of town. That was interesting. The boys would often get followed back to the truck owing some money from the bars, and the girls maybe. Or we'd go in with one shot up the barrel and safety on, just in case. If something blew up, you wouldn't have time to be cocking weapons.
That must have been risky.
Oh yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. But having said that, we stayed out one night because I learnt Taekwondo while there, because there was a detachment of Koreans there. So for something to do, a couple of Koreans come and taught to about half a dozen of us, or at least Taekwondo. So I got my blue belt, and they were called Rocks. That was their nickname, and they had nothing to hurt them. Amazing. They could hardly speak English, which was quite interesting. And we trained 2-3 mornings a week, because you'd have different starting times. You were 24 hours on, working, 24 hours off, and then 24 hours standby. So in that standby, you're in uniform, but if anything happened, you were called up straight away. So you might supervise the girls doing the sandbags, or you might do a little trip into town or whatever. Or you might go and pick up blokes for before curfew. But we passed the exam, so we went out in the town that night. And there was one of the corporals we called Darky. He was quite dark skinned. great. He knew how to do Taekwondo. And we had use of Army Land Rovers, and they were open tops. So there was no doors and there was no canopy on them, and we had an M60 man on the back. So have you ever heard of the RAAF patrol? It was like that. We had this M60 man on the back, so we'd drive around town one of those, or if we did escorts up the highway, you'd have a driver and a bloke in the front and someone on the back with the M60. Anyway, the M60 wasn't man enough. We're going to this little French restaurant, and we're in the back of VC Hill, which was the point of Vung Peninsula. Just, you know, all these French villas and little restaurants, and we go in there to have a celebration. And Darky's got his 45. We had 45s, American 45. We're in civilian clothes, and we're driving along. And next minute, this Army MP thing comes in behind, pulls us over, wants to know what we're doing, because we're in civilians, see. Mind their own business, we're RAAF, nick off. And Darky's getting a bit agitated, and the hand slides up on the 45. I went, oh no, don't do anything like that. So we showed our ID and told them who we were, and they still didn't believe us, actually. They thought we were a couple of army blokes had knocked off a vehicle. Anyway, so actually I've got photos of us in the restaurant, all getting pretty pie-eyed, and with the two Koreans and actually the bar boy who used to work in the bar for our mess was with us for some reason. We ended up going back to his parents' place and still drinking on at curfew, like up our living in the middle of Vung Tau. So because it was sort of accepted that the Vung Tau was sort of an R&R place for everybody, like the other side used to go there as well. Not that you would know that. So you weren't supposed to be out. So we were out that night having a bit of a good time. I don't know, it was pretty late when we got back. We shouldn't have been out. Pretty dark and quiet. I remember another time going in and picking up the sergeant. He was out very late one night. And we certainly had one up the barrel and the safety was off. We went and picked him up from his ladies' friend's place, yeah. That was a bit spooky.
Why?
Well, because it was presumed the VC were out at night, and you know they could drop anything on the. If they knew you were out and about late, they put something on the road, or they might just ambush you. I mean, you didn't know that. You didn't know. I mean, they go on about. When I say they, it's generally accepted that we didn't know who the enemy was, for want of a better word. You know, they go on about that stuff, but it was in the back of your mind, but I never took notice of it, which sounded a bit blasé. But when we went into town, the barrel was ready, and you were ready. It was like automatic. You did it or you didn't do it. I mean, you had time off. You go into town for the day.
Any tabs on the progress of the war?
Well, not really, no. That's a bit of a weird thing. We didn't... I mean... No, I hadn't. There was the RAAF news we used to get that would have updates of what's happened with the RAAF in general, but they'd have, what's happening over in Vietnam. Yeah, it was funny. I never did. Never got to read the paper to keep track of what we're doing. We just got a posting that was sort of like a little bit separate from it, a little bit detached. It's a bit weird, isn't it?
But had it been in the back of your mind that you might go, that
oh yeah,
that you wanted to?
Yeah, well, that was the initial posting. I mean, that was what we're told. That particular mustering involved overseas postings, whether it's Vietnam or Butterworth or whatever it may be. And in fact, now they've done. The boys have been to Timor. I think been to a couple other places. I believe a while ago they were involved in some security for the Commonwealth Heads movement a while here ago. So, I mean, the equipment they've got now, we were like kindergarten. We had rifles, compasses. And that was it. Now they've got flamer night scopes, they've got computers, they've got the stand things, they've got full-on equipment. They really are packed. And we were just very basic infantry stuff. So you had to rely on your own wits. So, flew into Tonsanut Airport. I remember us all getting a salad packed to eat while we're waiting to get flown out to where we're going. And my first impression was, there was all these military aircraft, jets flying around, because it was about the busiest airport, I think, in the world at that time. Of military and civilian aircraft, and some of the Vietnamese women were scavenging around the bins. I went, oh, God, what's going on here? And I didn't feel like eating. I've been drinking and I've been on an aircraft and feeling pretty dry and hungover. And a few of us had to fly out to Vung Tau Airfield. So they whacked us on a little 131, which is a twin engine, like a miniature Herc. It's a twin engine with a couple of ramjets in it. And we just strapped us on the floor and took off and landed at Vung Tau Airfield, which was a base with Americans on it as well. There's all these, looked pretty rough. There was all these buildings and wires going everywhere, telephone wires and communication wires. And I looked and went, I want out of here. I just had, I don't want to be here. It was the strangest feeling. So quickly settled in, got put into a section, and we're in huts on the air base, and got, this is how it operates. You're in a section, you're on 24 hours on. This is what we do while we're on. We do gate duty, and at that time, the main gate to the airfield was sort of in line with our compound. So we were within the air base, but we had our own compound. So there was wiring and fence work, and there was American MPs, and then there were our gate. Eventually, that gate moved up, so we were effectively outside the airfield, but we're still within our own gate. So anybody coming in and out had to be frisked, or we had Vietnamese women working on base in the mess, cleaning our huts. How easy is that? I mean, we didn't have to do our hut clean. Wash their clothes. So it was pretty easy. You check their baskets, and we were talking earlier about smells. They had their food and the little wallies, which I saw on the TV. I think they're called wallies. The little tins of 3 or 4 stacked on top of each other, they carry their food in. And they still do that in India today. The blokes running around taking food to the bloke in the offices. They went, oh, I know what they are. It's all I've forgotten about them. So they bring their own food in, and you check the baskets, and they be talking, and they talk a bit of English, and you might know 1 or 2 words of Vietnamese, and be all this carrying on and being silly with them and stuff, and they weren't supposed to be taking stuff out. If you had to give them soap or something, they had to write something in, so they hadn't pinched it, basically. It was all that sort of crazy stuff. They'd be employed to fill sandbags, which were used to put with reinforcement around the huts and that sort of thing. 2 weeks in country, our section had duty on the towers around the airfield, and there was myself and Ben. We went in. There was a tower on the approach to the airfield. So in the first hour, 2 would go out, and after the hour, 1 would go back, and then you'd be on your own for an hour and a half or something. And I'm a little bit confused about this. I think I was on my own at this point. And there was an aircraft coming in to land at night, so it was dark. It might have been 8:30, 9 o'clock. And actually, this particular aircraft now runs up and down the bay doing coast watch. It's called a Skymaster. It's a twin boom Cessna. They're called push and pull, so they've got a motor at the front and a little motor at the back. And he's coming in, and I'm watching, and I'm going, he's below the power lines. That means he's below the power lines. I mean, I'm in line. He's just coming in on approach way too late. So I jump off the top of the tower, so to speak. It was a bunker with a roof on it. And he pulls up below us and he goes around for another run. So he comes in the next time, and he appears to be too high. Like he's flat. He hasn't got the nose down, for want of a better word. So he's coming in, and he comes over way too high. And all of a sudden, about, a quarter of the way down, the motor just cuts out. And to the right of the airfield, I'm at the approach of the airfield, so to the right there was a swamp area around there. He just into the drink. So I ring up, and Ben comes racing out with the Land Rover, and we decide to head off into the swamp. And
we'll stop it. Take it back a little bit. You watched how the plane was heading into the swamp.
Going in the swamp, yep.
So you called
the radio room.
Yep.
Ben come out, and we decided to head through the wire, which is supposed to be VC proof, straight through the wire, and hit the swamp, looking for him, basically. We let the radio room know what happened as well, so they could take action. And I'd never been in there, so it was pretty grotty and weedy, and things float around in swamps. You don't know what's alive or dead, being snakes and stuff. And there was, I think, a couple of one of the towers had a couple of vipers living below, so we were set on the top of that tower. Anyway, eventually there's a local fire brigade that was actually run by American contractors that were run by the local Vietnamese. So there's a little fire brigade there. So we're wading through the swamp, calling out. At one stage, and I don't know whether my memory's playing tricks, but I still swear to this day, I called out a couple of times, I heard a voice, and that was it. And next minute, these flares are getting popped, and I could smell avgas floating around the water. Yeah, pop flares are a long cylinder. You detach the top half, and it's got a firing pin underneath it, and underneath the other half is the little cartridge. So you just pop it like a flare. It shoots the cartridge out, and it's got a little magnesium flare with a parachute, and it's very bright. I mean, if you see war movies and stuff like that, you'll see them popping magnesium stuff. They're only small ones, but they float down long enough. And occasionally, if you got bored, you might put one off over the fence some nights. Oh, I saw something on the fence. I just thought I'd check it, and they would float for maybe a couple of minutes over. Anyway, they're popping these flares off. And I'm thinking, if one of those things land in the flaming avgas and I'm anywhere near it, we could be in trouble. But anyway, they didn't, so that was
So
okay.
that was the fire brigade?
Yeah,
popping
the
off.
fire brigade popping them off because they told the fire brigade and they were trying to locate the aircraft as well. So eventually we found the aircraft nose down. I don't know how I did, but kind of sort of come around in a half loop and just hit the water nose down. And I remember pulling the doors off and there was 2 blokes in there. And as I pulled the pilot, it was a bit of a rattle, but he was dead, basically. And then, by then, the American MPs had turned up and our own service police who had a detachment there turned up. And there was a bit of talk, and all I remember is we were both pretty wet and, I suppose, disjointed for the whole thing, because I'd never seen a dead body. So it was my first piece of action sort of thing. So we just piled in the back of the SP's Jeep, left the Yanks to sort it out. They drove us back around back into the base. We had a shower. The officer on duty got called up, took some notes, took our statements, what we'd done, and the medical bloke had been called out, and he gave us a shot to sort of quieten us down a bit. And we took the night off, basically. So we had the next day off. That was Christmas Day, that's right. And we got this milk can. We'd call it a milk can, but they used to have cans that would keep drinks cold or hot. And we just started filling up with alcohol. So it looked like jungle juice and tasted it. I like jungle juice. And at that time, we just had these old American World War II Jeep things with a red light on it and stuff. So we piled it into the Jeep and drove around Vung Tower for a couple of hours drinking and terrorising the locals and creating a bit of mayhem, getting blind and drunk, basically. Because there'd been no talk about what had happened, there'd been no follow-up about the stuff. Come back for tea, and there was a show on that night in the picture theatre. So our radio room in headquarters was at the back of the open-air picture theatre. Well, it was semi-open air. It was a stage. And there was an Australian show that came over. So that was on that night, but the couples were giving us a hard time because we were pretty drunk. So they weren't impressed with us. But I remember going into Berry to get something to drink. God knows why. I mean, I'd had plenty to drink already. And I'd left my finger in the door jamb, like through the door, and just caught it. And I tell you what, I reckon I was sober in an hour. So didn't get much sleep that night. And I remember going up to the next morning, so that must have been Boxing Day, going up for medical. And Harvey, I think that was his name, I could be wrong, was on duty. So he got a hot needle and pricked the thing, let the blood out. And he gave me something to take for my upset stomach and probably threw up 2 minutes later. I didn't drink for a while after that.
So you never did find out what the accident...
No, we heard they'd been drinking and gone for a joy flight. One was an engineer and flew. So we don't know. But I think that was the sort of... That was the word they'd been drinking, just decided to go for a joy flight and took off in the Cessna, crashed it. And it's interesting, you think, well, you know, someone's dead, you nearly saved them, maybe. Someone's husband, father, brother, uncle. Would have been nice to be able to talk to the family, but, you know, it was just 2 weeks in country. So the rest of the time was spent on the base, occasional escorts. We got involved building an orphanage at the back of VC Hill. And the time of the Padre was Father John White, and he was involved in getting that off the ground. So the army come in with their equipment and sort of level out an area and got the foundations going. And each section on their day off, or their standby, would go out in the mornings and do work, and we'd go out with some sandwiches from the mess and a couple of big cans of Foster's. They had huge cans, not little ones, but huge cans. And we were allowed to have that at lunch. You weren't supposed to drink, really. And we'd go down to the beach with the local kids and muck around with the kids in the water and have a drink, and then we'd go back. And eventually the orphanage got finished and we got asked to go back for the opening. And of course you were advised against eating the local produce, which we did, and also drinking the local Barmy Bar beer, because they used to keep it cold with ice. Well, you know, the water filtration system wasn't flash in those days, so you didn't know what was in the water, but that was all right, it was beer and it was cold. And so we got involved with the local VC, oh, that's not the local VC, the local orphanage that had been built, what was called VC Hill. So it was a big radio network, communication section. There was actually underground stuff in the hill we got to look at one stage. It was all, you know, pretty rocket proof at the time. And it was sort of the entrance to the Mekong Delta where the ships were going into Saigon. You'd see them going up that way. Got involved with that, did some trips up, escort duty up to Saigon, Bearcat, to pick up wood and cement in trucks. And there was an interesting event where he came back and we were bringing back a helicopter engine or something like that. I can't remember why. I don't know why it wasn't airlifted down, but anyway. Excuse me, we were doing the escort, and there was a RAAF flat top truck with the stuff in it. And the mate who was driving it, we used to play volleyball together while we were there. And I was on the gun at the back on the Jeep, and we're driving along and going through a little village, and also these gunshots go off. And I swung it around, so the belt's already in the chamber, and safety was on. So all I had to do was switch safety off and cock it. So I swung around, did all that in 1 sec, swung out and battled it. Well, I didn't know what to fire at, and there was what they call the white mice, and there were the Vietnamese police. They had white helmets and white cravats and all this sort of stuff. We called them white mice. And he was doing target practice or something off the side of the road. Well, we thought we were being attacked. So if I'd opened fire and hit him, we would have kept going, because you just didn't stop, because there was a couple on there and they would have fired back. So you wouldn't have stopped to try and get an explanation. Luckily, I just, faltered for that second. And, we'd wound the truck up so you just get out of here, just flatten and just keep going. And, that was an interesting... Please explain, 2 dead Vietnamese. But that didn't happen, so it was interesting.
So, I imagine moments like that, you're pretty much on edge. You don't know when an ambush or whatever could take place. Was that sort of the sensation a lot of the time you were there?
Well, probably, especially if you went into town at night to do the pick up the blokes from town. They've been out in the town for the night. The curfew was 10 o'clock, so... And you're also taking the girls back who worked in the mess, officers' mess, take them home into Vung town. So I guess that possibility was there, but I don't know if you were sort of aware of it. You're aware of it, but you were waiting for it to happen. So how I explain is because, well, for me, there's certainly other ADGs who been involved with stuff up there, especially in Fang Rang and patrols, always waiting for something to happen. So my explanation is that it may have been good in some respects to be involved in a firefight to let that adrenaline rush go, because I was always waiting, or we were always waiting for something to happen. And you'd be going, ugh! You'd be like waiting for the tip of ready to be flipped over, and it would never happen. It's like possible ambush and, swinging around and nothing happening. So you have a rush, so you get this adrenaline rush, and the body's got this adrenaline running through its body and doesn't know what to do with it. So that sort of thing happening certainly has been shown medically not to be good for the system, because it overstimulates and then it's running around and affects your mental perception. Another time we were doing escort and we were going through a rubber plantation, and there was actually a firefight happening off the left, and as we come out of the rubber plantation, a helicopter, we were like that. So he was like treetop, if not below, and he didn't know we were there and I didn't know we were there. So there could have been a possible collision. Just like that. So you'd have those things happening on an ad hoc basis. They wouldn't happen for months, and then something would happen. On the base, the Americans would have what's called red and yellow alerts. So red alert means we'll run an attack. So everyone got up and grabbed their rifles, we'd get taken the towers, and then there'd be a stand down. So you'd be waiting for something to happen. We wouldn't know why they got called. They could be just called just to practice. Well, we didn't know that. Or they get yellow alerts, so it was sort of imminent and they got word something may be happening. But you still got called out. But after a couple of hours, the sergeant go, they can play the silly war games. We're going back to bed. Nothing's happened. That could be 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. So you get this broken sleep pattern. Go back to bed and you wake up at 6 o'clock again. So that sort of stuff would be happening. Every couple of weeks, the Longson Islands off Vung Tower was supposedly a VC area, and they'd attack that and they'd drop these huge magnesium flares, and the helicopter gunships would come in at night and sort of give the place a blast. There'd be tracer fire and magnesium flares. And it was like a little firefight going on, and all this fireworks happening sort of thing. So, spend most of your time sitting on the towers at night, or sitting in the radio room, or you'd be playing cards at 2 o'clock in the morning, waiting until your next shift come on, or you try and sleep and then go off and do your shift. But I got filled in time by teaching myself how to surf at Back Beach, where the army were at logistics. We had the old big longboards there. So I'd go out, get a lift across in the morning with a mail jeep, and you'd go into the army base and I'd go down the beach and have a swim and get the board, and I taught myself how to surf and do a little run on the beach. So I kept reasonably fit, then come back and then have a swim in the Harold Hole pool. And you'd often see the blokes coming down from Nui Dat, the army blokes, come down for a couple of days, what they called R&C. They'd set them up and turn, the do's and don'ts while you're here, and they'd break out the VB and then take them into town. They go crazy for a couple of days and do what you do. I kept fit sort of doing that. And it's a little bit of sailing. They had these little funny little one sail things. We'd go out a couple of times, but the water was pretty dirty and there's some sea snakes floating around. You'd be hanging on the board waiting for one more wave, waiting for one more, something would slip past your leg and you'd be on top of the board because you'd often turn up the beach and there'd be a couple of dead sea snakes hanging on the wire. But something to amuse yourself, I guess, But yeah, I taught myself to surf, kept fit, a couple of barbies on the beach there, on the back beach sort of thing. What else?
Can you describe to us just what the routine was like? You're talking about the 24 hours,
oh,
24
okay.
hours off, and,
yep.
and some of the sort of just the principles behind airfield defence, if you like.
Oh, right. Well, our airfield defence only went to the perimeter base, and there was a road that did run around it as well, and there was gates out the front. So it was checking personnel coming in and out. If there was an attack on the base, then all sections were drawn out, and you'd go to the towers or man the towers or man the fence line. It was more checking personnel coming in and off, or because there was a lot of civilians that worked on the base, because the Americans had a big component there. They had a big PX canteen. It was like a huge supermarket. Blokes would go in there and a catalogue. It was amazing, and they'd choose their car and they'd be waiting for when they arrived home. I'd never seen anything like it before. But yeah, there was a lot of civilians working on the base, doing cleaning, running the fire brigade, working for the Americans. So they would get checked. A bit of a pat down, check their contents. They have those little Ambrettas, little three-wheeler things moving in and around. They would act as taxis out the front, so you get a taxi into town. And at night, we'd man the towers from 6 o'clock in the night to 6 o'clock in the morning. We'd do that on our own, actually. Americans would sort of retire to the inside of the airfield, so I think we manned most of the towers at night. And that would involve 2 on first up, and then the bloke would go back, and then you'd be 1 on for an hour. And then they had lights on them, whereas when we did fence duty at Nui Dat, there were no lights on the fence line at all. So you get shadows, and you'd be getting a bit tired about 11 o'clock at night, or if you come on at 2 o'clock in the morning, and you look down and go, is that someone there? I'm not sure. Will I hit a pop flare? I don't know. It looks like someone trying to come through the fence line. So you'd have all this sort of weird stuff going on and think about everything. Why am I here? Is there a God? It's some stuff you just, what the hell are we doing here? You think, what is the purpose of all this at the end of the day? So it was pretty mundane and pretty boring. In fact, there's a movie come out called Buffalo Soldiers, and it talks about these blokes in America, American soldiers set up in Germany, and they get bored. It's quite boring most of the time. There's a bit of action and it's nothing. So, except for the occasional escort duty up to Saigon to collect stuff, or I went up with a mate on a helicopter for the day. It was pretty boring at times, The blokes get pretty drunk, but I didn't drink much. I mean, on a day off I might have a couple of beers, but I couldn't see much point after an hour, drinking is going in one end and coming out the other. I thought, well, it doesn't make sense to me. And you feel a bit lightheaded and can't remember what you're saying the next day, and I didn't like that at all. So I got smashed a couple of times. But played volleyball as well. We got a volleyball team up and running. We used to play against the different army units at Back Beach, because it was only just the RAAF. We were pretty small. It was 35 Squadron, which was the Caribou transport, the Wallaby lines, and 9 Squadrons, so they did dust-offs, which is medical evacuations and bush rangers. So, and there was small logistics backup. So the army had a fairly large area. So we used to play volleyball against them. Eventually got to the finals, and I got photos of us playing volleyball, and the commander had come across to watch us, and it was good. We were pretty good, actually, because I played volleyball at high school as well, and I really enjoyed the game. We even played against the local Vietnamese police academy. They just walked all over us. They were 5'0", like a beanstalk, and could bounce off everywhere. So it was a good game. We got wiped, but it was good. And the Vietnamese thought it was fantastic, so it was a good little game. And actually, they took in a couple of rockets. I remember hearing some rockets go off, and they actually took a couple of rockets which weren't far from us. And I got photos of smoke going off and all that sort of stuff. So that was about the closest we got to a rocket attack. But they took, VC decided to attack them rather than us, which was a bit strange, but maybe they couldn't even get in close enough to get the rockets to launch. It was little incidents that happened. There wasn't a lot happening. New Year's Eve, which I've been in country about 2.5 weeks, I think. I had that night off, and one was getting pretty blind in the mess, and I think I pulled a couple of coloured grenades and threw one into the back of the mess. There's red smoke pouring out. The corporal who was on duty that night was drunk and sort of berated me rather badly, and the officer on duty came up and sort of had to separate him a bit and tell him to go away. Yeah, naughty boy, don't go letting off smoke grenades. It was something to do. It was
so the airfield was under US jurisdiction, was it? Was that?
It was under US jurisdiction. We had our own compound. We looked after our own. We shared security, but the major security at night was our responsibility, and we shared gate security as well as our own, and looked after our own security within the compound. Because that was living quarters, mess, eating, sleeping, washing. Yeah, that was about it. Logistics as far as clerical work was further up near the squadron headquarters, but it was still within the airfield, so it was a pretty big airfield. They had gunships there called Cobras. They had Broncos, sort of tank attack things. They actually still use them. They use them in Iraqi. They were sort of small aircraft, jet-powered things. Nice to have their little bumblebees, little Huey's 500 things, quite small and round. They call them bumblebees because they made a noise like a bumblebee. And occasionally unmarked DC-3 would land there. And little Montaguards would trickle out, and then they trickle back on and take off again. That was the CIA, the Invisible Air Force. No markings at all. Just a grey DC-3. Still using those there. Just land, come in, get their stuff, off they go again.
And you knew what?
Oh yeah, knew what they were because there's no markings on them at all. So that was interesting. That didn't happen often, but if you happen to be around the base up the flight line or whatever, and or maybe for some reason on the tower early in the afternoon, you see it come in. And the RAAF, the Herc, would do their drops in. They would bring stuff in for us or medevacs out. So there was an army base at logistics where the medical hospital was, so the bloke would go there and then they'd airback them out at Vung Tower. So the Hercs would land, props still running, turn around, drop the back, load them in, take them off again. They wouldn't hang around. So the RAAF would fly in pretty regularly doing medevacs in and out of Vung Tower. And we'd get products and stuff that come in with the Japarut from Sydney. She'd bring stuff in and land it off the wharf. And at one stage she couldn't do that because all the war demonstrations were pretty aware of that. That's when there was a punch a postie on RTA because they wouldn't deliver our mail. It wasn't our fault. And these buggers weren't going to give our mail or pick our mail up. So it was punch a postie on back home. That was one of them. Then the wharfies went on strike, so they used the Japarut to bring stuff in instead of normal cargo. So we were a bit anti-them, they were anti-war us, and we were anti the blokes who were demonstrating. So I wasn't aggro, but just their mail, for God's sake. So you went home and said, punch a postie. Not that I ever did, but that was the sediments at the time. We had 5 days what was called R&C, the RAAF. We actually went to Butterworth. So we'd fly over on a caribou, but you had to be in civilian clothing. Which is funny, I'll backtrack a bit. When I actually flew out to go to Vietnam, we stopped off at Singapore. But because Singapore was supposed to be neutral, and there's 707 land full of 200 blokes dressed in military, so we all had their summer pants on, the biscuit drab colour. We all got black shirts, but we all had to have civilian shirts. It was pretty obvious what we were. So we landed in Singapore, all looking very civilian-like, and then flying on to Tonsanut Airport. And the same thing at Butterworth. We'd fly into Butterworth, RAAF-based Butterworth, and we'd change in civilian clothing. And then get a taxi and get a ferry across. We had 5 days in Penang. It was fantastic. Just, fell in love with the local receptionist in the hotel, bought her flowers, wrote her a couple of letters. There were some beautiful women, mixture of our Asians, Indian, Asian or Malay. Beautiful women, amazing. Slept in a bed with sheets and a blanket, air conditioning, went to a proper restaurant. You know, it was just good. Oh, the food was good at the time. You know, the RAAF food compared to the army was a lot better. Did a bit of touring and creating havoc in an aquarium, dropping some stink bombs. Don't know why we did that. We did. And yeah, just travelling around Penang and going for tours. And I've got photos going to a couple of Buddhist temples, and there was a snake temple, and they had huge joss sticks burning, and they somehow drugged the snakes, so they were sort of drugged it. I don't know whether they're taking the fangs out, but I've got a photo of me holding these two snakes. Everyone rushing up and taking photos of me holding these two venomous bloody snakes of all things. And then when there was a special turtle temple or something, this whole pit just of turtles crawling all over each other, sort of beautiful Buddhist temples and colourings. It was a cultural thing for me, you know, seeing the other side of, except Vietnam, the other side of Asian life and all that sort of stuff. So it was good. It was 5 days away. You escaped the other stuff and then flew back home again, or back to Vietnam.
Does that make it a bit harder in a way, going back, like getting that escape and then back into it?
Oh, look, I just accepted as part of what you did. You know, it was, I think, around May, June, so I'd been there about 4.5 months. That was a bit of a holiday. So everyone looked forward to it because you knew you still had time to go.
Now, just getting back to Airfield Defence for a moment, if I can. I'm just curious to get just a clear picture of the setup there. How many of you there were doing the work you were doing? Who you were answerable to? Who your CO was?
You asked me that half an hour ago. I think
I did.
Sorry,
you don't have to.
I told you I can talk.
You don't have to answer it. But
all right. Now there was there was 3 sections, and there was 10 or 11 in a section. So there were 3 sections of flights, or 3 flights, I should call flights. So 1, 2, and 3 flights. So we'll say there was 10 blokes in a flight. So flight on Monday would be on duty for 24 hours. So they'd man the radio room. So that's anything that comes in the towers or for Americans or whatever. So there'll be a bloke in there. There'll be a bloke on the gate to the compound checking traffic in and out, civilians. There might be some blokes doing work on the fence with the locals. Excuse me. There might be some stuff to take into town, or the other blokes might be doing a run up the road to pick up something. If not, then they're just sitting around, hanging around, playing cards till their time comes up. So you might do 2 hours on the radio room and then go off for an hour and have lunch and then come back and go to the gate. Section 2 or flight 2 would be on, have 24 hours off. So they've come off at 6 o'clock. So for the next 24 hours, they've got off. So, you know, we don't have to do your washing, it's getting washed for you. You might sleep. I went to the beach. Someone goes to the beach. Some bloke went into town to drink and meet the girls or buy records, or you could go into town. If you bought a reel-to-reel tape, you go and get dubbing done. Because I always find that was really weird. Here we are in Vung Tau, in a war zone, and here's these Indians running these shops, you know, which I thought was really, but there were a lot of Indians there, and they're running shops, so you could go and pick out your LPs of rock and roll, the latest music, and they record it onto your reel-to-reel tape. So you have this whole long play of, you know, copyrighted music for your reel-to-reel tapes, which everyone used to buy their reel-to-reel tapes. Or you just go shopping, or you may just hang around the base, or go to the back beach and swim, which I used to do a lot of. Have a meal, watch the pictures that night, get drunk if someone want to get, whatever you want to do. Then the other section 3 or flight 3, would be on standby. So they still walk around their uniform, but they might supervise sandbagging. They might be, if there wasn't enough blokes to do a escort, they might do an escort. That night they'd go into town to pick up the blokes before curfew, or take the officers, mess girls and the other bar people back home, escort them home, pick them up, bring them back in. They're on standby. They watch the movies, go to bed. But generally you go to bed in your greens, because 9 times out of 10, the Yanks want to play war games and you get called out. So rather than getting dressed, you just pull your boots on, grab your rifle and jump in the Jeep, and out you go and go around the towers and sit out there for a couple of hours, and then come back in, go back there. Then you're on duty for 24 hours, which was pretty basic. Radio room, gate duty, any other duties. We had generally a corporal in charge of each flight, and then a 2IC, which I was for a while. And then there was probably a sergeant, a flight sergeant, and then there was the commanding officer, usually a flight lieutenant, flying officer, usually a flight lieutenant. So he was the ground defence officer. So he was in charge of us, in charge of the ground defence for the airfield, and then there's the CO for the RAAF. So he's in charge of the whole RAAF base component, which is then 9 squadron, 35 squadron, your logistics, the service police, and then the squadrons had their own COs in charge of the squadron. So it's like a normal base, so chain of command sort of thing. I mean, if there was something that they needed us to do, we'd go and do escort duty, or maybe just sit around and, you know, like, it could be quite boring at days. There wouldn't be much to do. You know, you're just waiting for your time to go up and sit in the radio room, learn how to roll smokes in the radio room. The army blokes, if they come on the base, have to register their weapons with us, because everyone had the weapons. You didn't leave them anywhere. So we had a storeroom, they'd register their weapons, note them what they were, lock them away, you know, take the magazines out, wouldn't store the magazines with the weapons, and they'd take them again when they went off. They might come in for a meal. I thought our food was pretty good. I mean, we got rations, we had our rations, but we had a lot more sort of salady food and stuff. I mean, we also get American stuff as well, but the 2 weeks at Nui Dat, I got crook on the food up there. But also we were on malaria tablets twice a day, or once a day. I've gone blank on that. Whereas at Vung we're only doing it a fortnight on payday. And plus at Nui Dat you had to have sleeves down every night. There was a ration of beer, and we're on the malaria tablets daily. I reckon that made me crook as well. I got pretty crook when I come back. Mum reckons I had a touch of malaria, even though we're taking this test when I come back, because she nursed Dad because he had malaria pretty bad when he came back for a while. And Mum reckons I had it. The doctor didn't think so, but she reckons it was. I had this. I remember I was rowing when I was living in Melbourne, and I'd moved out of home and got my own flat and stuff, and met my former wife. And I remember going around the flat with her, where she was sharing with someone else, and I started to get the shivers. I just couldn't get warm, and eventually drove home, and shocker, sweated. The bed was just wet. I was really crook for a couple of days. So didn't last long. It was like just a touch. Sort of thing.
Did anyone else get sort of particularly ill while you were there, or was the food ever a problem in that respect? Or?
No, I don't really recall it. No, I just noticed I got crook when I was in Nui Dat. The food wasn't. I mean, food wasn't flush. I didn't think compared to what we were getting. We were living pretty good, really. It could have been a combination of the food and the malaria tablets, maybe. I got crook for a couple of days. I didn't feel real good. Didn't want to eat. Didn't drink. Didn't last long, but Nui Dat was, it's quite interesting. And we did patrol in the bushes and laid out. We went out the first night. We went out on an ambush. The cabins just opened up. As soon as we walked through the wire, the rain just come down in tropical downpour. If you've been in Asia and you've seen a tropical, it's like a bucket of water over you. And we just laid in the rain all night. Had some leaves in the mud, and I had mud in my chest for a couple of days. Couldn't get it out. Just laid in the mud all night, waiting for something to happen. Which it didn't, which was fine. And then I remember going out on a couple of days ambush and patrol, and there were little fireflies flying around the air, and hearing noises and waiting for something to happen and nothing happening, and it was really quite weird.
Sorry, this is
Nui Dat, outside Nui Dat.
Right. When these patrols, what was the nature of?
Oh, we could keep the area clear, but we think it was the light green, so there wasn't much activity happening immediately around Nui Dat. But it was for experience, so we went out with an army officer plus our corporal. So we stayed there for a couple of days, ambushed at night with supposedly knowing tracked where the VC might come through. I never did. Checking the locals around the area on the roads, so they'd come along their water buffalo and their carts, checking their ID. The water buffalo didn't seem to like the smell of us, so you sort of kept a wide berth around them, and just checking their ID, checking locals on the road, and then going back in the bush at night and setting up an ambush, and then eventually came back in after a couple of days.
So that would have given you a bit of a taste of what it was like for the infantrymen as well.
Yeah, and I guess it's nothing like some of the army blokes' taste. I mean, I remember going out with my mate Chris, and we did some drop-off of some fire support bases, and the blokes had been out for a week or two, and their greens were just rotten, and they were just taking out fresh greens and food to them, and they were just dropping them off. I mean, they'd been out in the bush for a week. I mean, that was tough. You know, we didn't do that sort of stuff. We had it pretty easy. But we had a snippet of what it was like. And I guess, as I said earlier, part of me sometimes thinks, it scared the hell out of me, and I could have got injured to be involved in exchange, just to get rid of that adrenaline stuff that was sitting waiting on the edge. So the mate explained it to me, and it makes sense. If you look at the human body as a glass, and we've got X amount of stress in us, and it's all in different levels. So the service personnel go over, and by the time they get over there, their stress level has been pushed up a bit. So if this is the glass, and you go over and there's stuff happening, plus there's no support at home, and all the stress levels there, by the time you get over there and you're starting to get involved, your stress level's sitting on the edge, and then it gets pushed over, or flows over this way, inside out. So he said, you're up here waiting for something to happen, but it's all so your amount of free play is not much, and then something happens and pushes you over, you don't have any free play. So what you've got to do is get that down artificially as far as you can by meditating or relaxing, so you've got more level to play with. So for all of us, the thing is to keep our stress level down here, so we've got more room to play. He said, by the time you get over there, you don't have much to play with, so it flows over. So my way of equating that was that if I'd been involved some way, or been on a helicopter and got in a firefight, or have I been up once with Chris and we got called out and things were happening, then something could have happened, but it didn't. So we had our own. I had my own little instances, the near miss on the M60, the helicopter just missing us on the road, that sort of stuff. Just everyone has their own experiences.
But were there other outlets for that? I mean, you're saying the stress levels. Obviously, for some guys, it's a matter of just maybe going out and getting blind and getting laid.
Or getting laid, you went into town. Everyone, went into town eventually, and the local girls who worked on the base call you Cherry Boy, because they know A, you arrived, and B, you hadn't been in town. Oh, you're Cherry Boy, you Cherry Boy. No, I'm not Cherry. No, yes, you Cherry Boy. And they, for some reason, knew eventually you go into town. They even knew what day it happened or whatever. So you go into town, you visit the brothels, for want of a better word, pay the girls. I suppose that was one way of getting rid of your energy. I think I lasted 3 months. And same in Penang. But Penang was funny because the bloke, our bicycle boy lined us up with a couple of girls who supposedly were school teachers who were more upmarket or all that sort of stuff. I said, okay. Yeah, right, whatever.
School teachers?
Yeah. School teachers want to make some money on the side. Oh, okay. So, that same thing in Penang. But that was how it was. I mean, a couple of blokes got really engrossed in women and fell in love with a local girl, or one of the girls working on the base, and they fell in love, wanted to give them soap and gifts and stuff, which you had to keep to a minimum because it could create a bit of antagonism amongst the locals. He get more than I got, sort of thing. So you weren't really supposed to give them much stuff. Maybe a bar of soap occasionally, that sort of stuff. So blokes in the town, I got drunk. And I didn't get, I think I can count on my hand the number of times. I mean, we had the bloke I was talking about, the officer, Nick Nui, came through on his way to Phang Rang, and he stopped off overnight, and we all sort of got on the booze that night, and I don't know what happened, we were in the barracks and we were sculling whiskey and Budweiser, and just drinking stuff, just drinking. And I don't know whether I got slipped a Mickey Finn or what, but I was so sick the next day. I threw my heart out. I swore I'd never drink again. I'd never been so sick. I thought I was going to die. I think I had alcoholic poisoning. I didn't drink for probably close to a month. Couldn't even eat. I was on duty that day, on standby, and I was in the ruddy room, and I was sitting down and sweating, and I'm feeling like I just want to lay down and sleep and not wake up for another week. Oh, shocking. But I was drinking beer and spirits, and not good stuff. Next time I got that pretty blind was on the week before I was returned home. And we had a little ceremony. So the last Saturday night, whatever blokes were going home the following week, they would present him with a pewter, a mug, and inscribe your name and time you arrived and you left. And you had to wear your most civilian clothing, but you wear your worst ones if you had such a thing, because you would eventually get stripped that night. Your clothing would get ripped and torn off you, and I've got photos of all that sort of stuff. And eventually they present you with a pewter, and you've got to scull it with whatever is in it at that time, or whatever you want. So for one reason, I had vodka and orange. Don't ask me why. they'd stand you on the bar and then they'd put rubbish bins underneath and you'd have to scull it. And as soon as you scull, you put it on your head to be firstly. So, and the sergeant who'd flown out of country with me was coming back. So I think we both finished at the same time. And I had vodka and orange. I think the vodka had sort of settled at the bottom a bit. But I got it down and sculled it. And here I am, the front of me, on top of my head and thrown down my mouth. Oh, not a pretty sight. Things you do when you're 20. So, and yeah, just rags of clothes hanging off me, that sort of thing. That was sort of, your leaving time.
Based on, if you believe all the American films on Vietnam, everyone's smoking dope the whole time.
Oh, yeah.
But did you see much of that, or was there experience of that?
Well, yes and no. I smelled it one night because the radio room backed onto the theatre, you could actually watch the pictures through the radio room grill. So even though you were on duty, you could sort of watch a bit of a movie. And I could smell this sweety sort of smell. Is that marijuana? I've never smelled it before, to be honest. I thought, well, it must be because we don't normally burn incense. Anyway, a day or two later, a bloke had been caught and he went sent home. That was the rumour. We never saw him again. He was a techo or something. Techo, we've heard a bloke do instruments and stuff. There's this techo ADG stuff. There's a bit of, I put it down to us being a bit like the Foreign Legion. We're pretty rough, you know what I mean? And there's a bit of antagonism between us and the rest of the Air Force blokes. But anyway, to answer your question, he went home. So I never saw anyone else smoking it. I've never smoked it, don't want to. I get crook enough drinking. I wasn't aware of any of the other blokes. We all just drank. If there was, it was done pretty quiet, and I was either very naive or just never smelt it. So the answer is no. For the army personnel, I don't know. They may have not. I knew there certainly weren't about the Yanks doing it, but we certainly didn't. And it was the last thing I want to do, going out and patrol. God, smoking. That's letting them know you're coming and letting them not being awake when they do. No, not something I did. We certainly didn't drink, and you certainly didn't wear perfume or even Johnson's baby powder, You went out pretty clean. Your dog tags had little rubber edging so they didn't make a noise. I mean, played it pretty straight. We didn't. I certainly didn't. I had opportunity in Penang. I said, no, thanks. Darkest, you want to try something? No, I get drunk on whiskey, that's fine. I know what's happening, I know where I'm going. I don't want to know about the other stuff. Not interested. So Darky was a bit of a dark horse. I think he lived on the edge a bit. Yeah. So no, the answer's no. I didn't do it. I wasn't aware of anyone else. Never smelt it. Only once, the bloke was gone. So things were kept pretty tight. Nui Dat was, it was pretty basic. The first week was spent orientation, so I was renewing of weapons handling, which all the blokes did when they first arrived. The army section or whatever turned up, they'd be reorientated with weapons handling, detonator handling, putting claymore mines together. Even the detonators were dangerous. If you didn't handle them correctly, they could go off and ruin your hand. So you had to be faux pay with all that sort of stuff. Patrol stuff, going over theory, sort of reorientating you into what's to be done when you go out, even though they've practiced all that stuff, in Australia, and even though we've been doing it to a degree in country, you still did an orientation, so you were doing things how they had to be done at the base. They didn't want someone walking and doing their own thing, basically. Plus we did some fence work at night, which means we sat on the fence with no lights, so you were just sitting in the dark, in spots along the fence, listening to strange noises in the trees. And we used to talk about these drop bears that would come out of the trees and drop on you. It was just a joke, the drop bears make this noise sort of thing. And so you didn't have lights to light the fence up, so your eyes had to become accustomed to working in the dark. And the weird thing about that was you do that night work, you might have a couple of hours on, a couple of hours off. You'd come back, have breakfast, and then you'd have to keep working that day, whereas back at Vung you'd come off and might have a few hours off or the day off, whereas we just kept working, so it was pretty tiring for a few days. But you got used to that anyway.
So what sort of sleep did you get?
Oh, you got your normal hour sleep, but the night we were on the fence, we just come back, had breakfast, freshened up, and then practice what we need to be practising, basically.
So tell me more about being on the fence. You're patrolling how far and how many of you?
No patrolling on the fence. We just sitting there, a bit like the towers around Vung Tau Airfield, except you were foxhole, I suppose, for want of a better word. Gee, it seems that long ago. I can remember sitting there, but we weren't undercover. We were just, I think, more of a foxhole effect. I think it was just to give us experience of being on the fence as well. So we didn't see anything. Although I did have a sort of a weird experience that I thought I saw a helicopter light and helicopters won't have light, and there was no noise. It was just light appeared. I mean, they had gunships, and the Americans had a C-131, I think it was. There was a name for it, nickname. It was just full of guns. Like it had machine guns and everything set up through its fuselage, and it would be called in and just strafe an area and would just literally cover every couple of square inches of ground with ammunition. Flying bullets, there's a word for it. Puff the Magic Dragon, that's what it's called. And actually, as I'm talking now, I've got some books somewhere you could have had a look at that had all types of American fighter aircraft that's packed away somewhere. Actually, it's out the back, if you want to have a look at it later. Yeah, Puff the Magic Dragon, because they would call it in for fire support and it would just obliterate an area, basically. But that's what I thought it was, but it wasn't. So it was just this white light that was sort of moving horizontally and then stopped and went down vertically and disappeared. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was a UFO. Who knows? You know, there was no sound, but there was no other experience on the fence that night. Just that particular night. Who knows?
What were the bush sounds like at night?
Oh, there was animal sounds, insects, stuff, drop bears, as we keep calling them, but I think they were just maybe a monkey crawling around sort of thing. Depending on where you were, you get the fireflies, little flying insects that light up, but we tend to see them more when we're out on on ambush and patrol. And it might depend on the time of year. So we saw a few of them when we were out on patrol and laying ambush. So you can be looking for lanterns. There could be these things just moving through the bush, because you've set up an ambush on known areas of activity, or an area where the locals weren't supposed to be after curfew. So if you weren't supposed to be there, then there's only one person that could have been there, possibly the VC. So if someone was there, it wasn't supposed to be there, you'd pull a flare or pull a claymore, which never happened.
But you did set up ambushes, is that right?
Oh, we did set up ambushes. So
can you describe setting up an ambush?
There'd be an area picked, and if there's a track nearby, you would pick generally the high ground if possible, but set up a line of fire, so you'd have us spread out. The machine gun will be in the middle, lead and ending. Claymores will be set up at supposedly a safe distance from you as well, and you would actually take turns on the machine gun at night, so the other blokes would be back further, might attempt to grab some sleep if possible, but you would be take turns manning the machine gun and acting as watch. So if something was to happen, you would pull the claymore and they open up fire, and the other blokes would come in, or everyone might lay for a while in the ambush and then maybe just retire, but be there, and you took turns manning the machine gun. But
so this is on high ground, near a track.
Near a track. Well, when I say high ground, that was the purpose of an ambush, if possible. But if it was all flat, it's all flat. So you just take the best line of fire, so that you're not being hidden too much by shrubs or by trees, so your fire's not dissipated. And also, a line of fire was set up generally so it crosses at the ends. You weren't firing out that way. It was cutting across each other at the ends to a degree. So if you're in another way they would do it, if you were to set up an ambush in a foxhole sort of thing, you'd set up so the line of fire cut across each other, so there was no gaps between the line of fire. So you might be in this hole facing across to your right, the other one would be slightly on this side, across the left, so the line of fire was cutting across, so you didn't have an open space where you were just firing straight out and someone could come through the middle, so your line of fire was meant to cross as well. Sounds all very scientific there.
Oh no, it's good to get these sorts of detailed descriptions of how you did it.
Yeah.
So what would you say in that situation when you're on high ground near a track? What would you be expecting to see?
Well, generally the VC, I guess, coming through might be wanting to infiltrate in or get close to Nui Dat itself, or
as a patrol or with vehicles, or
just patrols. It wouldn't be vehicles. They wouldn't be transporting stuff because it's too close to Nui Dat. No, the whole area was pretty secure anyway, except in '68 when they had the Battle of Long Tan. But after that, it was pretty secure. Bayria, I think is the correct name, the township just out of Nui Dat. Like there's a photo there of the potholes through the building where it's all been shot up. So the VC would come and go, but I think the Australians had that area pretty secure anyway. And the general consensus or understanding was that they wouldn't normally attack an Australian unless they thought they could outnumber them, unless they thought they had the advantage, because generally the Australians knew what they were doing. They didn't clump around the bush. They were pretty quiet and secured that area pretty well. So I think where we were working was light green, so it wasn't heavily dense. There wasn't a lot of movement, but we were being sent out for practice and for experience. But you never know, someone could come in through a track who wouldn't be there, because curfew, everyone had to be in town. They weren't allowed to be in certain areas. So if they're in that area, then they're only there for one reason, that is because they're involved in enemy activity. And you take them out. That's fine about it. You wouldn't be challenging them. If you did that, open up fire. You'd have a front one and truly firefight. So the advantage was to, if they look like it, then you'd pull the pin and open fire. Didn't happen for me.
Had it happened? I mean, what was the frequency?
Oh, look, I don't know, because we were out there for 2 weeks. Nothing much happened while we were up there. But certainly, I think the Army would experience it more when they went further out into the field, out for a week's ambush and patrol stuff. They would probably encounter firefights and stuff like that, or come across, VC or the NVA sort of thing, which was involved in the Battle of Long Tan. So, and it's funny, I was in the Air Force or a bit before, and I wasn't really aware of that. Depends how much you read papers and all that sort of thing. But what we were doing was pretty low key, but it was good experience. That's what we've been trained for, and got a chance to do it, basically. And if something happened, you knew what to do. You just go into automatics. Like once you walked out of the fence, you were on patrol. The weapon's ready, tell the position, this is what we do. If we're attacked, we do this. If we go here. You just go into automatic. That's what you're trying to do. That's what you practice when we're up at Amberley. That's what we're practicing, ambushes and stuff. And a couple of blokes that act as an enemy and open up with blanks and take the ground and attempt to find high ground if you could or whatever, and get the gun in position. So that was the purpose of the whole exercise. Whereas on the fence at Vung Tower, we're on towers, so if they were attempt to infiltrate, then you'd send up your magnesium flares and call in support, and you'd open fire from where you were. Then extra blokes would come out, and the Americans as well. So you may have a running firefight amongst the fence or inside the fence. There might be grenades going off or whatever. It just depends. But again, anything that happened there was from blokes getting a bit tired and a bit bored, setting off pop flares, and someone let off a grenade one day. Yeah, a bit more laid back, I think, Vung Tower to a degree. Yeah.
How can you describe the Nui Dat base? How big was it? Oh,
it was fairly big. There was 2 airfields, one for the helicopters, the bush rangers and that, and Kangaroo Airfield was sort of through a bit of scrub. Caribous landed there, which I landed on at one stage of the caribou, and I remember, I don't know what happened, and I think either coming or going on R&C, and we had to land it, for some reason, Nui Dat to pick up some army blokes, and we hit the dirt, and we were still rolling pretty quick, and I was up the front, and looked across and saw the pilot's hand come across and hit the brakes because the fence was starting to loom up pretty quick. I don't know where the pilot's brain was. I don't know what was going on. They sort of forgot to hit the brakes or something because it was a short strip, so it was only for short takeoff stuff. Don't know what happened there. But the pilot stopped it. We didn't get to see a lot of it, but from having seen aerial maps now, I see what was there. There was so the 2 airstrips, and up behind the Kangaroo Airfield, I think it was a small hill, and that was called Sass Hill. That's where the Special Air Services hung out amongst the bush and the tents. There was what's called the Playboy Club, which was the prisoner of war camp. And then there was the sleeping quarters for artillery and infantry and the different regimental artillery and your logistics, and it was fairly large. I don't know.
So
30, 40 acres, maybe more. I don't know how big. It was big, but to tell you how many acres, certainly bigger than the Melbourne football ground, let's put it that way. Huge. It's quite large because they had 2 airstrips and a couple of regiments and artillery support and all that sort of stuff. Although I remember driving around there one day at the end of the airfield with the sergeant in the Jeep, and this wild pig sort of ran out from nowhere, and we were about to pop it, and he went, I don't think we should do that on the base. It could draw fire. So this wild pig took off. Came out the scrub and we let it go.
So where were you located?
God, let me think. Where was I located? I suppose of an aerial view, we were to the left of the helicopter pad, I don't know, 200-300 yards. There was just a row of tents set up. They're all open air, fairly large tents with sandbags around the side up to about waist height, stretchers on the floor, 4 or 5 to a tent, some rope to hang up your clothes for washing, your little pans to do your washing. A lot of rubber trees and trees around. There was walkways as well, wooden walkways, so when it rained you weren't walking in the mud. The canteen or mess wasn't far away. You sort of hung around in that area. Again, it's. I guess if I was talking to someone else who was there, they might talk about something else, and then I'd remember something else. But sitting here, I'm just running off my own memory, so there's only pockets of information or things I can remember. Sometimes, it's only things that happen that you remember. All the other stuff, the day-to-day boring stuff, you don't remember really.
But it was very wet.
No, well, luckily it was the dry season. It didn't rain much when we were up there, so that must have been around somewhere around May, June. Didn't seem, I don't recall it being wet up there, no. It certainly rained when I was at Vung Town at different times, it was quite humid that, but sorry, you're right, it did rain, yeah. When we went out and ambushed that night, I forgot about it. Yeah, just bucketed down, laid in the mud, and you try and put some leaves on you so you're not in the mud. But it's a great way to lay an ambush all night in the bloody rain. So next day was spent cleaning the weapons pretty thoroughly because they got a bit wet. Yeah, it rained pretty heavy that night. That was the only time it rained, basically, was that ambush night.
So you said before that when you arrived you had to be trained, part of your time at Nui Dat was to be trained in the way things were done at the base.
Yeah.
Yeah, which may have been different to how you were taught.
Oh, a bit
the way
different.
You've been doing things. So
yeah,
is there something you can tell us about that?
Well, it's just to do with orientation, where the base is, this is what we do. If there's an attack, this is what happens, this is what you'll be required to do, I guess. The weapons handling was always important, safe weapon handling. If you're going to go out patrol, you set your claymores up, this is how it's done, make sure the distance between you and it, handle detonators like this, don't do this to them, they'll go off, you'll lose a hand. Just getting used to how the army operated within their own confines, I guess, just fitting in with what they did. Following up any information on ambushes, just keeping you up to date with stuff. A couple of nights on the fence, I think we might have had a couple of days are fairly easy. Come sundown, take a malaria tablet, roll your sleeves down, you're allocated 1 or 2 tins for the night for beer, and there was a meal, and just went back to bed, maybe wrote a note, wrote a letter back home. It was pretty easy at the time. We weren't taking weekly or nightly attacks, really. There wasn't much of that happening. Although, I remember we went back at Vung Tower one night and the corporal, for some reason, I think he'd been drinking and we were on standby. And he called us out, and it'd been raining, and he reckoned we were going up to Nui Dat, and I was second in charge at the time. And I can stand corrected on this, of course. And he reckoned we were going up to Nui Dat to help out, and I went, they've got a couple of divisions, battalions up there. Why they want 12 blokes? This is not right, it just doesn't. So I went down and saw the commanding officer who was in charge of our section, the flight lieutenant, ground defence officer. I said, this is what's happening. Is this true? And he said, no, I'll sort it out. The corporal wasn't happy with me because I'd gone over his head. So we didn't talk for a while. So he wasn't happy with that. But I thought it was a waste of time, and I thought it was a bit ridiculous, and he was all ready to pack us off in a jeep and send us up the road.
Was this before you actually went to Nui Dat?
Yeah, it could have been. I can't quite place the time and place. It was 1970. We may have already been in Nui Dat, I can't remember. But that just sort of sits in my mind that I went over his head and he wasn't happy with that.
Did you do that often? Was that something that you felt compelled to do?
I still do a bit to a degree within my working life, yes. But I usually take it up with people now before I go over their heads. But something I've always done. If someone's been picked on in the services or even civilian life, I'll stand up. But I just thought it was a waste of time. I think he'd been drinking, and he may have not been. Maybe he was just getting carried away with things. I don't know where he got the information from. I thought, no, this just didn't sit right. You get that gut feeling. This is bull. No, I didn't wait for him to just do something. I just went straight, saw the flight officer and said, look, Joe Blow's doing this, he's saying I'm doing this, is this correct? You know, he's got ready to take off the Nui Dat. He said, no, not going anywhere. End of story. He wasn't happy.
So just getting back to Nui Dat being in the base and being orientated and stuff, like you showed us a photo before of discharging the weapons before you came on the back into the base. So what was the protocol there? Well,
we got led back in through the wire because there was a path through the barbed wire fencing. So I think it was the intelligence officer who come out with us, met us out just outside the fence to walk us back in. So when you're out on patrol, your weapon's armed. You've already got a safety on generally. To the best of my knowledge, you wouldn't walk around it because you could fall over and the shot could go off. So if there's contact, you just flick the safety and start firing. So once we come inside the area, move inside the fence, you have to clear your weapons. That was meaning undo the rocket launcher, make sure there's no grenade up there, point the weapons either up, or the M68 to point down, lift the back of it up, and also remove the belt, lift the back up, safety on, make sure there's nothing down the chamber, no loose rounds, close it, pull the trigger because it's also set, ready to go, make sure there's no round sitting in the chamber for some reason, so if a shot goes off, it goes in the ground. Because, you know, you could be walking back with a live round up the barrel and you might fall over somewhere. There's no need for live weapons immediately on unless there's something happening. So that was just a safety protocol you had to do straight away when you went in. So that makes sense to be like walking around on a normal base with a loaded weapon. You don't need that unless you're under attack sort of thing. So we had weapons at Vung Tau, but they weren't loaded. I mean, we had our magazines, but they were kept separate. And if that weren't happening, like if we got called out, then you'd whack the magazine in. You wouldn't cock it, though. You'd have it ready, but it only takes half a second to do all that. But clearing the weapons was a safety precaution. And as you go out, you cock your weapon and it's ready to go.
So what was the strategy if you came under attack at Nui Dat?
Don't remember.
I mean, was there?
Look, I'd have to theorise. I guess our section we call that. Well, I think we're allocated an area of the fence line anyway, and it would depend on what's going on. And if Nui Dat, I think, was ever to become under attack, and I think it may have once started, we'd be through rockets anyway. So it'd be rocket launchers dropped in against. I don't know if they get an actual attack on the wire per se. It'd be more a rocket attack just to disrupt the system or take some people out, or if there were aircraft there, maybe attempt to hit the aircraft. So with a rocket attack, you have to dive for safety and wait to see what's happening from there.
Were there trenches?
Good question. I don't remember. I didn't know shocking. I don't recall. Well, there was plenty of sandbagging stuff, so you'd throw yourself against the sandbags. So if a rocket went off, the sandbag took it, unless it was on the other side, of course, next to you. I don't recall. That sort of thing, I just don't remember. Can't remember. Yeah. Just, if that was to happen, you'd dive for the sandbag and wait and see what happened, whether you got called out or whether you took the fences or just kept your weapons ready. And if that was the case, they'd be trying to locate where the rocket was coming from. They'd call the artillery in, probably, to either fire back, or they may get someone up in the air to attempt to spot them. And then they would then, in turn, the spotters would then direct the artillery, and the artillery would start firing back. That would be the way they'd counteract that. No, the base certainly would be on alert, and they certainly would man the fences in case it was a diversion then for someone to try and infiltrate. But I never experienced that anyway.
You were talking about stress levels before, with the glass and how they rise, and you can go over. Did you experience that kind of stress at Nui Dat? I mean, being much closer to the action, and was it a different kind of experience for you than Vung Tau? Did you feel less secure?
Well, it was just another extension of my work or our work situation. So the answer is I probably did, but I wasn't aware of it at the time. It was probably more stressful in the fact that we're actually out there patrolling, because we didn't do that at Vung Tau, whereas the ADGs up at Phang Rang actually went in patrols outside the airbase. So they got more experience of that. But I guess in terms of being at Nui Dat and going on patrol, being on ambush, experience we wanted to have, an experience we're being given. So I guess the stress level was certainly being pushed up higher in the glass within the body, which means you had not much room to play with if something were to happen, but if anything was to happen, then the reaction would be automatic, well, it's supposed to be automatic, in a response that you either go to ground, return fire, group, look where it's coming from, and then take directions from whoever's in charge is what to do next. But I guess on reflection, it was just something I was doing, which sounds weird. We were trained to do it, and you were tense and ready for it. But when I think back, it was like an automatic space to be in. You weren't thinking about what would happen, or what if this happens, or what if that happens. We're just out there patrolling, out there laying in the rain, waiting for it to come along. If someone comes along, they're not supposed to be there, then you open fire. That was simple as that, basically, which may not have been as simple for some other people, but that's how we operated. I'm not quite sure how the Army operated as far as what their protocol was, but we were in the light green, so I don't think there was much to be expected, but you just didn't know. There's always an unknown factor. Someone could come, a couple of people come walking down the track who weren't supposed to be there and carrying weapons, so it certainly wouldn't be challenging.
Was it very busy at the airstrips? Like the helicopter strip?
Yeah, the helicopter strips were reasonably busy. There'd be, the Yanks might fly in occasionally. The 9 Squadron bush rangers would be coming and going, maybe taking troops out or going out in support, or might be one going out, taking some troops out, and a gunship might go out with them. They always had one there for dust off on standby, fly down early in the morning and be waiting. So there was a couple of huts off the side amongst the trees where the blokes would hang out, waiting for a call. So it could be quite some days. Other days they'd be quite busy. Depends what the Army was encountering. Occasionally the cavalry would come in and out, maybe bringing some troops in, bringing some stuff in, maybe more like troops more than anything. Often they could come down in convoy from Nui Dat to Saigon anyway. Nui Dat to Vung Tau, which I think was an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours away. Or they might fly them down, just depended, I guess, how many was coming down and whether there was a caribou coming and going. But they tend to operate up and down the country a bit, doing what's called the Wallaby Airlines. They carry troops and goods and stuff. So, it was reasonably busy, I guess. But I didn't spend a lot of time up there.
Can you explain what dust off means?
Dust off a term when they had a medical evacuation happening if there was the Army had encountered fire and taken wounded on, so they'd have to come in and once they secured the area, certainly it'd be harder for them to get in if the place was hot, which means there's a gunfight going on. As soon as a helicopter arrives, they're like a sitting duck. So generally, I guess once the area was secure, the medevac chopper would fly in, they'd put the wounded on, they'd take them either back to Nui Dat or straight back to Back Beach Logistics, the Army hospital there. Again, I didn't have an experience of that. You'd see me coming and going. I guess the how badly wounded would determine where they take them.
So what was your impression? Like, was there a lot of fighting, a lot of action going on? Were there many wounded coming back?
Oh, look, I didn't see any of that, to be honest, no. Because I didn't do a lot of helicopter work. I just went up a couple of times with a mate and spent a day up there, so it was pretty low key. We went up once, I think. I did a little bit of support, let some rockets off, started a bit of a grass fire. That's about all. Yeah, I didn't see all that other stuff. That's why it'd be worthwhile if other blokes were to do this, especially blokes who were, worked on the gunshits and stuff. You get a completely different perspective about what happened, or the pilots as well. In fact, I remember one of the pilots, he'd played for Footscray or had played for Fitzroy, one of the two teams, and they started up a football game for a while, but then he got told he couldn't play because if he got injured, they'd be one less pilot because we didn't have a lot of excess pilots. So I played rules for a while, then found out I got hurt too much, so I stopped playing. I couldn't get hurt in other ways. A bit weird, isn't it? I returned to volleyball and just wear a volleyball in the face. But yeah, the pilot, he played for VFL at the time, had played, and he was a pilot, and they said, no, we need you as a pilot, we don't want you playing footy. So that was interesting.
Can you just tell me, you said you flew out with a mate. Where did you fly to?
Oh, we flew off from Vung Tau, and we flew to Nui Dat, and we landed there, and I guess waited for something to happen. I think they got a call out, so I went up to get some experience what it was like to be on the chopper as a gunner, because I was offered the position to do so, which was good, you do so many hours, you get the half wing and just the whole buzzy thing, And I think they got called in to support some contact going on somewhere in the bush outside Nui Dat. I can't remember how far it was. I think there's a couple of photos showing the fire that started after they fired some rockets, M72 rockets, and not much came out of that. We didn't take fire, we didn't have anybody firing at us, and just let some rockets off, and they dispersed and they were fine, and eventually flew back to Nui Dat. American rations were pretty free. They were accessing, there was cans of peaches and pudding and all sorts of things, and their ration packs had little packets of 5 cigarettes, and you'd have them in exchange for something else or some chocolate and stuff. Their ration packs were quite amazing. But that was the only time I went up, basically. It was just up in the chopper to fly up and get some experience. I went up a couple of times, I just kept getting airsick. It was very annoying, but as I said earlier, I think that I was being looked after. It's like, no, you stay on the ground. Get your experience on the ground. Because, if a chopper took fire and got taken out, it only one way down, straight down. They didn't survive their falls very well.
Okay, so anything more that you can say about Nui Dat?
No, not a great deal. I mean, yeah, I've said a couple of times, the food didn't seem really flash, but that's just the way things were. No, look, it's set amongst the rubbery trees and the rubber plantation, the trees. It was, it was tropical. Just a 2 weeks experience, doing patrols, doing the ambush stuff. We're pretty safe. We flew up in a chopper and come back in a chopper, which is good, so we weren't stuck on the road. The blokes I served with, I got some photos of them, which I can't locate at the moment. I found out later a couple have died. I don't know what from. They sort of died later, which is interesting because they'd be in their early 50s. And in fact, I was at a meeting just before Christmas for the RAAF Vietnam veterans. I'm on the committee, and the secretary was saying, Shorty Lee had died. And I said, what? Shorty Lee? And he was a little shorty, like a funny bugger. And we don't know what or where from. Yeah, just died, and you go, geez, that's bizarre. Early 50s, and we don't know. I don't know what from. It could have been an accident or whatever, we don't know. But blokes are sort of starting to drop off one way or another. It's like a bit weird. It makes you more aware of your own mortality. You just think you're going to be keep living, for want of a better word. And these blokes are in their 50s and they're dying for one way or another for whatever reason. So there's a couple of blokes who've died who I've known, but I haven't experienced anyone who I knew up there who had died. Although having said that, there was one bloke, I think he might have shot himself up in Phang Rang, if I can recall, but I'm not 100% sure. Although talk about shooting themselves, there's there was a sergeant up there we called the Phantom, because you could never hear him turning up. He'd sort of arrive and you just wouldn't hear him, so we called him the Phantom. And he was in the sergeant's mess one night, and he had a little pistol, and somebody ended up shooting himself in the foot. I mean, you weren't supposed to carry a weapon into the mess at the best of times, but we don't know what he was doing with it, but he shot himself in the foot, so to speak, as the expression goes.
Was that deliberate? Or?
Oh, I think it was accidental. He was probably mucking around with the bloody thing and showing his mates, and discharged, which is easy to do. It shouldn't, I think it was a pistol. Actually, no, I think it's a revolving chamber, so you only have to sort of cock it or something and knock the trigger and just slip your finger in and off you go. So it was a bit of a joke. He'd shot himself in the foot. Not very smart.
Okay, so back in Vung Tau. Just at what stage, by the way, did that trip to Nui Dat occur during your time?
I think it must have been mid-year, maybe June. So it was. I mean, it rained, like I can recall once up there, so it wasn't like the wet season. I'm pretty sure that's the dry season. So it might have been mid-year. I'd certainly been in country for a while, so I might have been nearly halfway through my tour, I guess. And our section got flight just got picked to go up and do an exchange. So, blade blokes had come down, they'd man the gates, do what we were doing. They'd get an experience of doing that, I suppose, which would be a bit of a change for them. So probably halfway through. It's not something I was thrown into straight away.
So, sorry, who were they that came down?
It'd be just a section of army who were together in part of a, maybe it was a 7 RAAF or whatever, who was there at the moment. They set it up so there was an exchange between the two services so that we got a better understanding of what was going on the two different bases. So, 12 blokes of theirs that come down, they'd look after the radio room, get some orientation, do the gate, do the towers at night, do what we were doing basically. And we went up and did what they were doing for a week. So that was about all that was happening there.
So you're sharing this base with the Americans. The Americans are very well supplied. The PX is pretty...
PX is pretty full on. It was like a supermarket. I haven't seen anything like it. I mean, we had our little canteen, not there, but, back home, the ASCO, Australian Services Canteen Organisation. So you could still get something to eat in between meals. It was like a little cafe, for want of a better word, toasted sandwiches and stuff, and bacon and eggs. And there's a bit of a store attached to them sometimes on the bases. But this was the full-blown menswear, jock socks, food, clothing, all your car was there for when you arrived back home, your Thunderbird or your Mustang. It was just, it had everything and anything. I mean, it was a quarter store as you say, a store built into a whole supermarket complex. It was like so mind-boggling. Everything's so bigger in America. I think I went there once or twice just to buy some extra stuff in my clothing, or I can't remember what it was now. It was quite bizarre, like full on. And then their flight rations with cigarettes and pudding and fruit and chocolate, and it was just had everything in it. So if you crashed or whatever and the flight rations are worthy, you'd be right. It's quite bizarre compared to our rations. Yeah.
So was there sort of wheeling and dealing with the Americans?
Yeah, well, there is a little bit. Yeah, I remember going up to Bearcat, big airfield just outside Saigon. Huge base, those aircraft and stores and logistics. And we went up there with a big, I can't think of the name of the truck. Learned how to drive it, like it had 8 gears, a huge, big thing you often see in World War movies. No, it doesn't matter. Anyway, we went up there and we stayed overnight, and the Yanks liked the slouch hats for some reason. We slouch hat with him, so it's either a slouch hat or a dozen VB. I mean, they were drinking Budweiser. It's like lolly water compared to drinking VB. So for that, you'd exchange. They had these poncho liners, which are like a camouflage silk blanket, and they would line the poncho liner so they're waterproof, and this would go inside to sort of keep them warm. And I remember exchanging my slouch hats, which it's silly to do, but anyway, that's what you did. And I think I bought a dozen VB, so I got 2. So I had a dozen VB, my slouch hat, and I got a couple of poncho lines, which I've still got. Been carting around for 30 years, and all my numerous changes of residence and abode, and could have bought that there and showed you. Oh, here it is. Remember this? So it's camouflage green looking thing. So I've still got them. Yeah. I think a couple of boys were involved in a bit of stay shady stuff on the side, and one bloke was able to get a hold of a little Willys Jeep, those World War II things, and you still see them. And then he reckons he had some Yankee who was wanting to get hold of a Land Rover and he could give us a chopper or something. It's like, what? Well, when they left Vietnam, they eventually pulled out. The choppers were landing on their aircraft carrier, and then when one got off, they just pushed them off the edge because they had no space for them. I'll give you a helicopter. You give me a Land Rover, I'll give you a helicopter. And they just write stuff off. They couldn't understand how we had to account for everything because we just didn't have the equipment. So that's why things were pretty tight. And there's rumours and supposedly rumours or stories about the RAAF not always going into tight spots to support the army. There's a bit of funny antagonism stuff about that still. I don't know anything about it. It's just gossip I hear. I've heard rumours and blokes talk about it, and I don't understand that sort of stuff, 30 years on it. Why keep going on about that stuff? But that's because the Yanks had the aircraft to burn and blokes to burn, so to speak. So, they're probably quite willing to go in and do what they had to do, and they saw it as their job. So I think just, the RAAF. But the RAAF did their job as well. So, again, you need to talk to people who were there in first hand to get that experience. You just hear these funny stories getting around. And blokes make comments about the RAAF, blue orchids and all that sort of stuff. They don't do the hard stuff, but it's crazy stuff. because we're seen as, I guess, sort of the junior service of the Navy, Army and the Air Force. They consider us to be the junior service. So there's a bit of that stuff back in the 60s as well. But it was all in good nature, it wasn't, fight and all sort of thing. So, there was sometimes talk about that, but certainly a few of the blokes are selling barbed wire or selling corrugated iron. I don't know where they got it from, but they were selling it and making extra money, and then they had to get that money home because you're allowed to send a certain amount of money home each month from your pay. So they were asking me if I could send some extra money, and I said, no, I don't think so. I'm not interested. I don't want to get caught up in anything here, thank you. So there's a bit of black marketing stuff going on. Not quite sure. I didn't want to know about it. Don't ask me, I don't know it. That reminds me of an incident one night. Just out of Vung on the way towards Saigon, there's a big fishing village, and we'd on one of our patrol escorts come back and picked up a big crab and bought it and put it in the mess kitchen. Anyway, I was on duty that night in the radio room, and the boys had been drinking, and they got a bit hungry, so they broke into the mess and got their crab, as you do. And they wouldn't eat. So they got reported, so the service police were called in, and they were, acting all tough, and who's this, and how they get in, and you were here, and you're on duty, you would have seen them, and you know what's going on, you who did it. And I said, well, they got their crab. I don't know, I didn't see them. They went past, I didn't know what they had. They'd gone down in the kitchen, I knew what they had. And there's all sorts of threats flying around. Oh, we'll send you home if you don't, tell us who it was. I was like, oh, it's only a crab, for God's sake. It's a mess. They got in, got some food, they haven't taken weapons or something. But, they were playing it all up, I said, it's a crab. I didn't see them. Some blokes went past, I don't know what they had. Like blown it all out of proportion. But I guess, they didn't have much to do. They had to sort of do something, I guess. But it was, and talking of kitchens there in the back where we sort of had a semi-kitchen, the rats were in pretty good supply around the area. I remember walking down there one night and there was this big, black, ugly rat sitting on the sink, and I just went, oh my God, I just turned around and walked out. It was like, I don't want to know about it. I don't need to go in the kitchen tonight. And you'd often sit on the towel some nights and you see a couple of them running around, you sort of find a loose sandbag and try and drop it on them. Oh, I was shocked. And occasionally the mice would be running around over your bed at night if you're going to sleep. The mice are running around. Just that there's the back road to Back Beach, so when you come out of the main gate of Long Tower, the airfield, you turn left and you wander around the back way and you meet up the main road that you would meet if you're going a long way around. And there was a sort of a little hospital, Red Cross complex on the corner of this intersection, T-intersection. And I don't know, we'd been over to Back Beach or something, and one of these huge American trucks come around the corner and took the fence out. And there happened to be one of these white mice I've talked about there. And the yank didn't stop, so the white mice bloke just pulled out his 45, bang, he just started shooting after the truck. The yank just planted his foot and kept going. Because the story was, if you either run over someone or shot someone accidentally, you don't stop to sort it out, just get out of the area, exit, because you don't know what the reprisals would be or who they were, basically. So you were very careful as well. But another interesting place was what's called the Five Ways in Vung Tau itself. And they all had all the national flags, all the countries there. And it was sort of a meeting spot if you're going to meet someone for a drink or meet someone in town. But years ago I was in Perth and I was wandering around the back of the museum. There's a couple of shops and they were Vietnamese and selling stuff. And I thought, oh, this looks interesting. So I walked in and started looking at the artefacts and the things, and a girl came out and we sort of got chatting, and when she found out I don't know how I'd come up or what I was doing there, that I'd been in the Air Force and been in Vietnam, she went out the back and got a father, and he'd been in the South Vietnamese army. We got chatting and he had a little restaurant down the road. You come down, have a meal with me. Didn't do it, but it was interesting how he struck up this instant friendship because he'd found someone who'd been there, sort of thing. So there's a small group of them that march actually on, they certainly march on Anzac Day. And I think there's a small group of South Vietnamese now march on Long Tan Day, which is August 16, 18. At the shrine, a small groups of march, but usually they march on Anzac Day. But not many, might be 30, 40 of them, sort of thing. So that's interesting. They're the ones who got out and didn't want to stay there, sort of thing.
So, were there many South Vietnamese military personnel around?
You'd see them in town, certainly see them in town, but they weren't on the base per se, the Air Force base, and they, maybe some officers might come through occasionally, but they were more stationed in town and maybe outside Vung Tau itself and their own bases. We didn't have a great deal to do with them, no. We'd certainly see them in town, walk around in greens and stuff. But I didn't go into town a lot. Used to go and maybe get some tapes, reel-to-reel tapes made, because I bought a reel-to-reel tape, and when did I buy that? I bought that when I went to Penang, picked it up nice and cheap. Echo tape, still got it, still works. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. All this 1970s music. I don't know where I'm going to play it. And you'd often go and just buy the Echo big 7-inch tape and say, I want that, and walk away and have a drink or visit the girls and come back and it'll be all recorded for you and exchange your NPC, which is the military currency. I mean, a monopoly, we call it monopoly money, because every so often the Yanks would maybe, I think it might have happened once while I was there, maybe twice, they'd change the currency. So one night the NPC of this type is worth what it is, 5 cents, 25 cents, $2. The next night that is gone, they bring this new type in, so all that is useless. All that NPC money is just no good. So blokes the Vietnamese might have, a couple of $1,000 of this stuff, and it's hopeless. Just either exchange it or that you don't. So it was really like monopoly money. So it was used to a degree on the base to buy stuff and a little bit in town as well. Not much American dollar stuff. So they changed the currency overnight and blokes could go bankrupt because they had too much and may have to justify where they got it from. So yeah, that could happen occasionally. And there were stories blokes, been going broke overnight, like in town itself, sort of thing. But not us, because you wouldn't have any point to collect that sort of money. So you get an allowance of, I don't know what we're getting, some ridiculous allowance, and you hear what the bloke's getting now. Then it was enough to buy your drink and stuff on the base.
But why would they change the
currency? To protect it and stop blokes accumulating it and building up a big supply of it and black marketing and all that sort of stuff, yeah. They just completely changed it over. So they probably had it all printed up and ready to bring it in when they thought things were getting a bit too hot and things were just, I don't know, they just decided to change it. Overnight you have to go back to the pay office and exchange the money and get the new currency. Still NPC, but it's different. Different colour, all different design maybe, it was just, they change it.
So were you using other currencies as well as the NPC?
No, there wasn't. Oh, there was the Vietnamese money, but we didn't use it that much. I think I've got a couple of copies, it's like stuff I bought home. You could use that as well in town, but usually the locals were happy to take the NPC, or you might exchange it for the Vietnamese money. I don't know if it was worth much. I'm not too sure, to be honest. But again, the locals were happy to take the NPC, and because that was a sort of a standard bartering form of money.
So NPC money could be transacted in town between Vietnamese.
Yeah, they used it as well. Yeah, and I guess they could, and I'm assuming this now, and I might be wrong, they could work out an exchange rate for the local Vietnamese money as well. But I didn't use a lot of it much. I think I bought a couple of notes back and a couple of metal dongs, and that was all. Didn't have a need for it really. Used the NPC on base, so buy your beer and wine and beer and whatever else you need to get done, haircut or something like that, or go down to the Yank PX to buy something extra. There wasn't much to spend money on, except girls and beer and girls. Sorry.
Well, no, I was going to ask you about the girls and the recreation, and I mean, were you at all concerned about venereal disease and STDs? Was that something that was discussed, or?
I don't think it really was.
Protection?
Well, it was certainly discussed at one of those father and boys nights years before, but it just depended.
Were you aware of unwanted pregnancies amongst girls? Was that something that was known about? Or?
Heard about it, but no, wasn't aware of it, no. No, didn't see them. didn't know about it, wasn't aware of it till later, I guess. You hear about it later than you. I read about it in the paper. I don't even remember being told about it or anything like that. So, yeah, I think I got to friending with the padre, Father John, but nothing like that ever came up because we were involved in building the orphanage, but there was never any discussion about that sort of stuff. It didn't come up for discussion, so out of mind, out of sight sort of stuff, I guess, or out of sight, out of mind. Wasn't talked about. But it was interesting being involved doing some community work there. I mean, it wasn't, we just went over there for 12 months and, you know, drinking and womanising and stuff all the time. You know, we got involved in a little bit of community work, which was good. And gave us something to do in the morning and instead of sitting around their bums and twiddling our thumbs. Yeah, it was good. So it was good to see the community. I presume the orphanage is still there. I would presume so. So it was sort of a bit of community work got involved with, which was good. But didn't have a lot to do with the locals. Not a great deal. Just the ones who were coming in off base, working on the base, and got to know a few of the girls. And you know, you joke and carry on and make jokes and make funny remarks when you're checking their bags, and there'd be a lot of laughing and, well, who hooked the lie? You number 10, you number 10, and well, you number 1, you number 1. Depending on what you're saying or doing to them. So, yeah, because the girls that usually work there all the time, so you got to, if you were there for 12 months, you got to know the regular house girls or whoever was working on the place. You know, the girls who worked on the bar or worked at the officers' mess, they'd have to be taken home each night because it was a bit late and, you know, they could be bumped off or, you know, just a courtesy thing they did. They took them home. It was funny. I mean, it's probably a bit like the big Tonsanut and Bearcat. You know, the locals working on the airfield up there. Those locals working the front end loaders and the big forklifts. You know, when all service personnel working there. So we went up there to pick up some cement and wood and stuff for the orphanage. Now there was like a Vietnamese woman working the forklift, so they were utilising them on the base as well. As I said, we didn't have to clean our huts. I mean, I think they even made our beds, I think, to a degree, you know, and wash the sheets and wash your clothes, and so it was paid employment for them. So we were looked after. A bit of a bugger coming back and having to do your own again after 12 months and take care and go back to a base and maintain it and maintain your room. A bit hard to take. Having our own housemaid for 12 months. Sounds a bit weird in a war zone. But, you know, that was on an air base, so we weren't up in Nui Dat, so to speak. I don't know what it was like at Phang Rang, where I think they would have had locals still working there. I assume so, doing the same sort of stuff. But I think at Phang Rang there was the Air Force was there, I think the American Air Force, and also the Koreans, and I think even the South Vietnamese had a contingent there. So there was four major. The four nations were there, at the best of my knowledge. Certainly Korean, because I've seen a flag raising ceremony, and it's Korean, South Vietnamese. Yeah, I think there is the four Americans and the Yanks. So that would have been a lot bigger, a lot more happening. There would have been flying jets out of there, the Canberra bombers, 2 squadron flew out of Phang Rang, the RAAF 2 squadron, who lost the Canberra bomber and its pilot navigator. When did they lose them? Late 60s, early 70s? So they're still missing in action, actually. They never found it. So that's something that the government's doing through the Americans who are still trying to locate the MIAs. I mean, that's sort of like looking for a needle in a haystack, really. And that's, they've still got that on the records, but 30 years later, some local will have to sort of stumble across wreckage and find it and report it. I mean, who knows where it went in. But yeah, they're missing in action. A helicopter go down. Yeah, it was. Yeah, helicopter, great aircraft. I used to love flying them, but you're a sitting duck. You're just floating around somewhere up the sky. If you're down low, especially, it doesn't take much. A couple of shots through the engine, get the smoke rising and controls going haywire.
So with the Korean contingent that was there, they were.
Well, we had some blokes there, but look, to be honest, I don't know what they were doing. We had them certainly teaching us Taekwondo. They may have been based in town, in fact. I really don't know. It's strange. One of the blokes had done Taekwondo and brought them on to teach us and said, if you want to learn it, want something to do it 3 days, 2-3 mornings a week when you're not working, and got pretty fit. I had the uniform. It was a heavy sort of canvassy sort of thing. It sweat like anything. And they had us doing push-ups on knuckles and punching rope boards to build up the callus on your knuckles, and doing movements before you'd even do the free spar. I remember a couple of free spars. I missed some blocks of war. A young kid was practicing with us one night, a little Vietnamese bloke, and they taught him some extra kicks. And I was doing some free spar with him, and I missed the kick, and he clicked me fair and square in the groin, and I went down like a sack of tomato. I thought I was going to die, absolutely die. I've never been kicked there before. I mean, you see blokes on the TV and they get kicked and they jump back up and they go, I don't think so. You don't get up after one of them. And Toddy was moving my knees up and down, trying to get me to breathe, and it wasn't a pleasant feeling. And then another night, Darky actually had been shown to do a side kick or something, or free spar, and I missed his block, and he clipped me right across the nose, just with his toes, just come across, not a full on. But it was good, because they had a real discipline as well. It wasn't just a martial arts for fighting. There was actually a creed they had that you had to recite every morning before practice about using to protect women and children, and not to use it only for provoked, or it was, you were in a corner and had to fight your way, that sort of thing. There was actually a creed with it, so it was a very martial art discipline stuff. I mean, all the Koreans learned it in the services over there, but it wasn't to be seen to be used badly, or just for fun. So it was a sort of a self-discipline actually, which was good. I enjoyed it. Oh, I enjoyed it. And I sort of took it up when I come back and then let it go. And then I went back years later and went, no, I'm not just getting hurt again. Getting blocking and kicking, and I went, no, that ain't too, it hurts me too much. I took up rowing instead.
Did you spar with your mates out of class?
No. It wasn't appropriate. That was part of it. It wasn't something you did. You only sparred when you were training. There's only 3 of us doing it, myself, Toddy, Brendan, Darky. So there was only 3 of us basically doing it. No, there was no desire, no need to. It wasn't seen to be used for that sort of exercise.
Have you ever used it for self-defence?
No, I haven't been in a... Well, having said that, I have been in a fight with another bloke in the Air Force, but that was towards the end of my tour, and so a few words spoken, there was a shoving and pushing, I didn't get a chance to use it. Unfortunately, had me in the on the bed in the hut and give me a bit of 2-0, and they pulled him off. So, and then I had to drive up to Nui Dat or somewhere on an escort that day, and I wasn't feeling really flush after being punched around a bit. So I gave him the silent treatment for 2 months. Just didn't talk to him. Completely ignored him. He wasn't in my section, so it didn't matter. And actually, I can remember I was actually listening to the Goon Show. That's what we were listening to. The ABC was relaying it through the Radio Australia. We were listening to the Goon Show of all things, and I don't know. He said some words, and I answered back, and he gave me this remark, and it kept getting quite heated, and shove come to push, and it was on. So no, I didn't get a chance to use it. I should have, I think. Yeah, so
was that something that had been brewing, or was it?
There was a bit of antagonism between us. He was a bit of a smart ass, I guess, and I just tried to ignore him. And he just one day was standing there, and he just blokes stir each other on, they say things and call your names, and I got jack of it and reacted, and didn't utilise my teachings. So I come off worse to wear for a bit. I wasn't hurt or anything, just bruised and stuff. But I had to jump in a bloody Jeep that afternoon. Drive up the road, so I'll fix you, I won't talk to you. Bit girlish to do that, but I like it. That saved me sort of have to deal with him anymore. Yeah.
What were you escorting up to Nui Dat?
Good question. Near Nui Dat, Bearcat, we might just taking some goods up. I don't know what we're doing, taking something up somewhere. I can't remember, to be honest.
So that was one of your roles, wasn't it?
Yeah, escorts up the road. So you'd be the Land Rover with the M60 on the back place. You have your own rifle with you, and I think we're escorting a truck up the road somewhere to pick up stuff or do something. So the truck wouldn't go up on its own. It wouldn't ever go up with someone just riding gunshot. The Land Rover would go up as escort as well. So, I can't remember. things you remember quite clear, and other times I just remember myself driving off and the sunglasses on and feeling pretty sore and sorry for myself and cursing mentally and having to do the job. So I can't remember. I mean, it doesn't tell you much, but we're going somewhere, doing something. I mean, like some days it was quite, not boring, but it was just repetition of work. 24 hours on, 24 hours off, 24 hours standby. And it just run 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
But getting out of the base, was that like an escort job?
Oh yeah, it was something to do. Even the trip into town was something to do for the night. You know, go in and pick up the blokes, take the bar girls home, or the girls that work behind the bar. There weren't bar girls there, so it's in, girls to be talked to. They were there to do a job. That was all. It was something to do. Go see the countryside, and you're still on edge. You're still not wanting to get involved in anything unless something happened. Except for those couple of incidents I talked about earlier, it was just a straight up and down run. But you still had to be alert because you didn't know if anything was going to happen. So you go through a village and they could have opened fire, or they could have seen you going up and watched a couple of routes and plant a mine in the road. You just wouldn't know. Or going across the bridge and they'd blow the bridge. It was just an accepted risk, I guess. That's what I'm saying. You just did. Same as blokes who leaving Nui Dat or going up to Nui Dat or whatever in trucks, or going out somewhere. They were on APCs, or they could, run across a mine. So similarities of risk, I guess. But something you weren't driving around. Well, I wasn't certainly driving around with my forehead, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to operate or function, I guess, fully if you're too concerned about what was going to happen or may happen. If something happened, then you reacted or responded. So just did the job. Yeah. It's a bit like nothing, I guess. Well, a similarity is in my work, doing body work and stuff, and I've worked in different spas, and someone says, "Oh, we've got a VIP coming in, so and so's coming in." I go, "Well, so he's coming to see get massage and body work. Why should I treat him any different?" I mean, I'll still be pleasant and polite. I don't want someone, I don't know if there's any analogy, sucking up into them or being different. You do your job and make them feel there's confidence in your work, and you just treat them and be pleasant, polite, and then they're okay. I don't know if that's a good analogy. You just do your job, not worrying about who the person is. You go do your job, not too concerned, or you were concerned about something may happen, but you wouldn't want to be walking around thinking, "Oh, I could go in the corner and someone's going to shoot at me," or "I drive around here, something could happen," or you'd be useless. You wouldn't be able to function properly. Because I think that just comes down to your training anyway.
Did you fraternise with the Americans very much?
Look, yes and no. Got to know a few of the MPs who were on the gates. Oh, look, they come through. We get to know a few MPs, but again, I think we could have kept ourselves to a bit.
Did you socialise with them? Did you drink with them?
No, not a great deal, to be honest. No. If I went into town, I often would go on my own, because often blokes would go off and do other things, or I'd go and get some taping done, or I'd often go off swimming on my own. I spend a lot of time on my own. Occasionally the section would get together for a drink. We went over to Back Beach one day and had a big barbie of this huge semi-trailer full of this huge esky full of ice and VB, and had a barbie for the afternoon on the beach, but not a great deal. And if we did, I can't remember how we met them or where we met them. They might have come back from the base and we had a few drinks on base, and we drank Budweiser and they drank our VB. But as forming friendships with them, no, I didn't. It's sort of a strange sort of situation. Maybe because it was most of the Air Force squadron, so they just had their pilots and backup staff, and they did their own thing, we did our thing. There wasn't a lot of intermingling as such, not like some blokes did or you perceived to see on their TV. I didn't see a lot.
What did you think of them? I mean, generally, in the way that they operated and their attitude to the war?
Attitude, we didn't talk about much. They were seemed to be pretty laid back and pretty friendly. They seemed to be taken with them Australians and the accent, and loved the beer because it was nice and strong, and thought we were just fantastic. Well, sometimes we gave a bit of a hard time. We used to take the mickey out of them a bit. I remember we were going up on an escort. I don't know where we were going. Don't ask me where, because I don't remember, but it was a convoy of Americans coming past. They got flak jackets and helmets on. We wore, nothing. Just got our silly giggle hats on, no flak jacket. They got flak jackets and helmets. And they gone, peace, brother, peace, brother. I go, yeah, yours too. he's given a bit of a hard time actually. Get a bit rude with him, but they thought it was all quite good fun. But as I was sitting down and talking about the war and stuff, didn't happen. We just did our job. There was a couple of officers come around some nights to check on the towers at night, and I think I might have dropped off to sleep for I don't know, a millisecond, and this yank got pulled up and said, "You awake up there, boy?" "Yeah, I'm awake. Yeah. You sure you're asleep?" "No, I'm not asleep." Right, gone like that, because at 2 o'clock in the morning and you're getting pretty tired, you can go like this, and you help. Oh, a whole 5 seconds, you feel like you've dropped off for about 30 minutes. It's a shocking feeling. You just drop into deep sleep and come out again. I saw an American talking one day, one of the MPs, and he was giving him a hard time. Oh, didn't like the way he was talking. Really talked down to him. He was black and he was giving him a hard time. He was an officer and thought, oh, don't. And it was this boy stuff. Don't talk to me like that, boy. I hated it. The way they say it, it's so degrading. But a couple of Yankee MPs were big Negroes, and boy, they were big men. I thought I would want to meet you in a dark corner somewhere and give them a hard time. I look like they look after themselves. But when the white Caucasians, some of them spoke to them, and occasionally they talk to me like that. They use the word boy, and it has this degrading tone in it. Not a nice word. Not a nice way to talk to people, I don't think. That's how some of them talk to their own blokes. So, which I didn't encounter any of that sort of degrading or talking down stuff with other ranks or anyone, because we're a pretty small compound and everyone got to know each other pretty quickly. It wasn't a huge contingent. I mean, you got to know most of the air crew. Some of you didn't, like 35 Squadron were busy doing their own thing, but 9 Squadron, because a lot of the ADGs would go up as gunners on the gunship, so they got mix and talk with them and the air crew.
So what was relations like between the air crew and the ADG, for example?
Oh, look, good. It was good. Yeah, we got on well, because often we might do trips with them, and because we're supplying the extra gunner, we all knew each other, so there was no antagonism. We were there to do each other. We used to pick on the blokes, especially they'd never get out of their flying suits. They'd come back for a drink and go to the brewery, and they'd be there at 10 o'clock at night, talking war, he's doing this. Only because I want to do. I wanted to be there as well. So, I couldn't get me, to get a can open and get their flying suits off them all. I mean, it was all in good fun, and they get their hours up flying the country with a half wing and beyond. But that's, it was part of what you were there for. I mean, it would have been nice to do it, but they were good. We just had fun. It was just boy stuff, making fun and without being antagonism or that sort of thing. But we all got on well. It was good. Got to know the pilots a bit and all that sort of stuff. It was funny, the last long tan, the one before, I think it was, long tan march, the officer who gave an address up at the shrine was Air Commodore Beatty, and after he finished talking, they explained where he'd been. He'd been a pilot in 9 Squadron, the way he was picked up. And he was there in 1970, and I just couldn't get his face right, because, he's in his 50s like me. And I said, "Oh, do you remember Air Crewman Charlie Brown, gunner ADG?" He says, "Oh, yeah, I think I flew with him." I ring up Charlie Brown. I said, "Charlie, you remember Air Commodore, Pilot Beatty?" He said, "Yeah, I flew with him." So it was interesting to sort of come across someone like that. He gave a really great address, but he's now retired. So that was interesting to just cross paths briefly with someone like that. He was sort of that same period. We were both there, and he knew Charlie Brown and had flown with Charlie Brown. So it was good. So it's good always to catch up. And I think, every couple of years I try and, attempt to get up to Queensland and do the Anzac March up there and just catch up with the blokes up there. Not to spin wars, but just to sort of catch up and just talk and see where blokes are at and all that sort of stuff and what they're doing. Some haven't changed, some have, Some blokes are doing things completely different. You can't get 2 words out of them. Depends on the shared experience. I guess that's what I'm saying. They might have been there, but in a different flight and doing different things, even though you were there at the same time, they're doing their own thing. So you don't have a lot of commonality. And if you haven't talked for 15, 20 years, what are you going to talk about? Some blokes talk, some blokes don't. So it just depends. But the Airfield Defence Guards nowadays have certainly got all the whiz-bang goodies, and it's good.
How much news were you getting from home?
Dad used to send the Sun Herald across occasionally. He used to send the old Picks and Post. Remember, you ever seen the Picks and Post magazines? Send them across, and, you cut out the girly parts and stick them up on the wall and all that sort of stuff. He'd send them across regularly. Mum would write, Dad would write occasionally. I'd write. Actually, I asked one day, Mum, if she'd kept them. He said, no, I didn't keep. Why would I want to keep them for? Oh, okay, it's all right. Fine. I just thought you might have kept them, just to see what I was writing. No. We read them and they're gone. Oh, okay. It would have been interesting to read back to see what I was writing about. Not that you could, not so much you couldn't say a lot, but some days were quite boring. Got up, went to work, sat on the guard, checked the locals, watched the radio, nothing happened. Went into town, had a drink, watched the sun come up, went swimming, went surfing. The news used to come up. Dad used to send the papers across in the Picks and Post. That was good to read, just see what was going back in Australia. And I also remember the cartoon that used to be in the Picks or the Post, the Outback, those drawings of that pub. The pub built outside Albury-Wodonga on an angle. Gone blank. But there was a cartoon that bloke could draw these funny things happening around this pub thing. Rabbits running around with traps attached to their legs and parrots flying backwards and all these strange things happening. It'll come to me now. But that was when we were keeping up to date with news, and also working on the radio station with Radio Australia. And they used to, that used to come through most days, so you hear what's happening back home and that sort of thing. Demonstrations and the postie's not going to deliver the mail, and the Japaris not going to get loaded. So we wouldn't get our load of beer and bloody wharfies and punch a postie when we get home. So that was sort of how we kept up with news. I don't even know what I wrote about half the time. There was only so much you could say. Sometimes you couldn't talk about stuff happening. You wouldn't want to say anything. If you'd been under a rock attack, you wouldn't want to tell them that because they get all upset and worried. So, not that we were, but just wrote.
So while you're over there, you're getting news about the anti-war protests in Australia. So how did that affect you and your mates?
Oh, I guess at the time we were pretty angry about it. We didn't feel supported. I guess to me at that time I thought we were doing the right thing. I mean, after having read a few books now and looking at how Mr. Menzies was pushing us to get there and, all that sort of stuff and what's come out since, in theory we should never have been there. In theory, according to what I've read, the Brits gave Vietnam back to the French after the Second World War once the Japs had been pushed out. So if they'd left it be, Ho Chi Minh would have come in and may never have gone pro-communist. But anyway, that's past politics. But at the time, we guess, felt we were doing the right thing and didn't feel supported, and that was all, bullshit. And, the communists were, that communism was, something to be dealt with one way or another. I mean, if the shoe was on the other foot, maybe we would have, had insurgents and guerrilla force if someone tried to take our country over and didn't want them. Can't make it. And the Vietnamese VC and the NVA experienced similar stuff to our blokes. They were fighting for what they thought was right anyway. And they've had similar experiences. They've got a huge return services thing over in Vietnam. There was a write-up in a paper recently at the Viet Cong and NVA. They've got a huge return servicemen's league. It's immense. But at the time, we thought we were doing the right thing. And, there was no support back home. There's demonstrations and uni students and the wharfies and all this sort of stuff. Why not attack the government? Why hassle us? I didn't have the experience of blokes being spat on and all that sort of stuff, but we certainly flew in late into Kingsford when we returned home, and I didn't have any of those experiences again. Maybe because I was on my own and didn't stand out as much, and I was moving around in my uniform, getting looked at a bit, because I had to return ribbons and all that sort of stuff. So, but I didn't have any experience in the street per se. But at the time, while we were over there, blokes weren't happy about what was going on back here. Lack of support, but there was a lack of understanding, I guess, on both sides of where things were at and where the politics of the whole thing was at. So we were only aware of what we were doing and what we'd been told, I guess. And now when you read books and stuff released, it's a whole different ball game. Such as in Iraq now, same. Justifying a war for, you could have taken Saddam Hussein out in another way, maybe. Who knows? I mean, haven't found anything, and It's all sort of conspiracy theories floating around. And then I support the blokes going there, but not a healthy one to go into. I mean, if I was in the Air Force and now would I go? Well, I probably would, I guess. Something one does. I might have my own private feelings, but when at the time I went to Vietnam, I knew I had to go, and I was happy to go and see we're doing the right thing, for whatever the right thing may be at the time.
What about the conscripts?
Didn't have a lot to do with them because they were all Army, all the Air Force were permanent. I wasn't aware of any conscripts who come in and were sent into the Air Force. They all went Army. And, some were sent to Vietnam, but they still did have a choice. I mean, I've got a friend at Parkdale, he got called up, he actually spent his time up in Canungra, driving trucks around and stuff. So he did 2 years, after basic training in Canungra, didn't get posted. I think he may have got posted and he said no. I mean, some blokes were sent.
So you don't remember any disgruntled conscripts?
No, we didn't have any, because I was permanent Air Force. I was, 69, so I was 19 and a quarter, nearly 19 and a half. There was a posting, we were all permanent Air Force. That was part of our job. There was no conscripts amongst us, so it was just our job we were doing, yeah. So that wasn't, as if we had to deal with them at any stage. And if I come across them, I wasn't aware of them, like the Army blokes were all there doing a job. So if the Army blokes could have been a mixture of conscripts and permanent servicemen, there was no difference between them. You wouldn't know anyway, unless they told you. So I had no experience of that.
Did you have any experience of men like losing it, like becoming psychologically unstable, emotionally unstable?
There was a bloke, I think, up north at Phang Rang. I think he did shoot himself. That was the only one we're aware of. I think he was an Airfield Defence Guard. And if the same one I'm thinking about, he may have been like that a little bit, I think, before he went over. I'm not sure how or why, but I think it was the same one. And we're aware of it, but I'm quite sure how he got into the services, but maybe it happened after he got in. The bloke took himself out. Well, I don't know why or what his experiences were when he was in country, but that was the only one I was aware of. Other than that, most of the blokes seemed to be okay. They drank or smoked weed if they had weed. I never come across it except for that one situation. I wasn't aware of anyone, no. Not anyone who was psychologically affected. Maybe years later they might be. I don't know. Unless you sit down and talk to them after a while. Although I noticed when I was in Brisbane a couple of years ago, a few of the blokes weren't drinking at all. They were drinking like mineral water and bitters or light stuff or lemon squashes, which I thought was interesting. Now, whether they had been told not to drink or they've had problems with their drinking, I didn't know. But certainly young blokes, and I'm talking about the blokes who ADGs who marched with us that day, they were right into the alcohol. And I went, my God, look at this. I was sculling jugs. And I said to Charlie, he said, we did that. I said, I don't remember sculling jugs. The alcohol mentality of the service is still there. The whole mentality, the whole culture around drinking is still pretty strong, I think, in the services nowadays. Just from what I observed anyway. But men drink, in period. But it's just interesting to see that aspect. I'll get them right into it. It's a bit scary. Drinking that much. I've been crooked too many times. Don't do that anymore.
So when it came time for your tour to be over, were you relieved about that? Were you happy to be?
Oh yes, I think I was happy to come home. Yeah. They gave me a choice, and silly me put down Victoria, thinking unlikely to get it, because there were a couple of RAAF bases with Point Cook and Laverton. I think there might have been 2 ADGs there looking after training of personnel with weapons, maybe a couple other odd jobs. And so when they sent me back to Victoria, their Air Training Corps headquarters, I went, oh God, it's the last place I thought I'd be sent. I didn't even know they'd sent that. And we just doing semi-clerical work. It was just a waste of time.
So you had no choice?
I guess I didn't think I had a choice. I never thought of asking to go somewhere else. I never thought of speaking up. It was a bit weird. Nowadays I do speak up. I get myself wound up about it and then speak up or say the wrong thing. But at that time I just took it as a posting. I mean, if I'd gone back to Richmond or been sent to Queensland or Williamstown, I would have been a different life path. I would have probably stayed in for a while and stayed there longer, but I got sent back to Melbourne, stayed at RAAF Base Tottenham for a while and got jack of that and applied to live out and lived with mum and dad for a while in out of Dandenong and travelled into work each day by train, and then eventually bought a car and eventually got, had problems with my ears and eventually had a medical, blah, 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 and got medically discharged. So I'd had enough, actually. I think things had changed. So I don't know whether it would have been different. I'd gone back to a proper base with more blokes. Whether I would have stayed in longer. There would have been a different effect, I guess, as to coming back here to Victoria. The whole life path would have been different completely.
Did you consider going back for a second child?
No, never crossed my mind. No, some blokes did. I don't know if many Air Force blokes did. A couple of blokes did, but I didn't hear of many. It tended to be more maybe some of the blokes in the army. No, did one that was enough. I thought it was, done my bit. I don't know what for, because at the end of the day, it didn't really matter, did it? Didn't really matter at all. But that's, in the bigger picture, there's something else going on maybe. Who knows?
Did you bring any souvenirs back?
Pictures, that was all. Couple of head carvings, but I bought them in Penang. They were Malaysian headdress women, like a bust thing. Been carrying them around for 30 years. They look identical, but they're not. So they're my little mantelpiece things when I eventually settle somewhere permanently, pull them out and set them up again.
Now you said that there was a point when you became sort of 2IC. Mm-hmm. Now, can you tell us sort of the background to that, how that happened, and what sort of extra responsibilities that entailed?
Well, I think I got it because I was now a what's called an LAC, which is leading aircraftsman, which is probably equivalent to about a Lance Corporal in the Army approximately. It doesn't carry out a lot of duties. It usually means you've upgraded your skills in your particular mustering and you're more competent and you have more understanding of the stuff you're supposed to do, basically. So you've upgraded your skills and you're proficient in X, Y and Z. So you've passed tests and done some theory stuff, and you're given just like little propellers. I think they're now just one. Actually, I think now they use one stripe in the Air Force now. They don't use the little propeller, use the stripe. So that's sort of just below corporal. So I got a feeling I might have been that before I went there or just after I arrived. And particular section, I think I was put in charge. It was the particular corporal I was talking about. He was. I was working with at the time. That was generally just organising the blokes and just taking control as far as if you were on ambush. I think, on patrols I was in charge of the gun group, so that was the M60, so I was looking after the M60. Directing the blokes, but generally it was pretty easy going. I mean, I wasn't out there giving orders per se. I mean, if our section was on duty for the day, I might have to take the blokes down the base to organise the sandbag, so I'll get them together and off we'll go. So there was no real, I say this, you do this stuff. It was pretty, everyone knew what they had to do, so we just did it, so there wasn't any great degree of authority. Having said that, I think after there was a change of corporals, and then I think I lost that position to another bloke, and I was a bit peeved about that. I don't know whether it's because I went over the other corporal's head, I'm not too sure why, or maybe I wasn't demonstrating enough authority as 2IC, I never found out. I was a bit annoyed and a bit perplexed at why I didn't have it after a while. This other bloke took it over and I wasn't impressed with him either, so he was a bit of a smart ass, I thought. Anyway, that's the way things went. I didn't lose my rank per se, I just lost the position, didn't have the position anymore, but it didn't worry me much. Everyone was doing the same job, with no more pay or whatever for it, so it was just a position we carried. So that's what I eventually, when I was discharged, that's what the rank I still held. Although if I'd gone and done the recruitment training, drill instructor stuff, I would have had the rank of corporal. Yeah, no big deal. Yeah.
So what was your relationship like with the officers and those that you were answerable to?
Oh, look, good. Yeah, we had a good working relationship. The blokes weren't overbearing. from what I remember, the flight lieutenant, he had a good personality. We got on well. We didn't have a great deal to do with him. I mean, he was there to make sure the section ran properly, and we did our job around the base, and he liaised with the boss, and you know, he was answerable to the CO, or you know, he was like to liaise with the Americans at the base. But you know, it was you know, mate, you knew our names. You might use your first name, sort of thing. Yeah, got on well. He was a good bloke. Didn't have any hassle with him at all. I didn't have any hassle with most blokes, really, officers or otherwise. I remember being RAAF base Richmond. You know, there was a Welsh sergeant there, and it could be a bit, we say a bit snaky. You know, he was a bit. You had to read him to how friendly he was, and if he wasn't very friendly, you had to call him sergeant. But when he was okay, you could call him by his nickname. And the other bloke was Bushy. So, yeah, and the bloke, and they must have been in their late 30s, early 40s, I think. So Bushy's all right, but you know, if something went wrong with Flight Sergeant Bush, but you know, things were okay with Bushy sort of thing. So it was pretty relaxed, really. The officers you addressed as Sir or Flight Lieutenant so and so, they had nicknames, but they mightn't have known about it. We used amongst ourselves because some were a bit disparaging.
Were there any kinds of tension in Vietnam? In times when, be it through boredom or, you know, some old rivalries perhaps, or anything, any times
no, look, again, I wasn't aware of it, no, except for my own personal interaction with another bloke. No, one or two blokes maybe, but just more of a personality thing. I think you just avoided them. You know, if they had a drink and got a bit nasty and a bit snaky, you just kept away from them. Didn't push the point. There'd be no point in get into an argument with them. You know, but generally, again, everyone got on pretty well. Everyone had a job to do. We were there. I guess we were looking after security, so people tend to do what we told them, because we were there to protect them per se. And again, you have fun. You make light-hearted. I tend to make light-hearted stuff, and you know, the Jeep comes through the gate. You flick a bit of a salute and stuff. You know, and sometimes it could be pretty casual and good morning, and yeah, just be pleasant. So everything got on well. I guess all services can be like that. Depends on the nature of the personality of a person, really. But if someone starts rubbing people the wrong way, they got taken aside. And being blokes, there was no side stuff. You know, everyone was up front more or less. You know, told to smarten up or cut it out or otherwise. You know, blokes tend to be a bit more up front and talking sometimes.
Were there ever times where, in the course of just doing your job, like at the gate, for example, you know, you might have irked someone, an officer or something, because they weren't doing what they were supposed to, or?
No, it didn't happen. Really, didn't happen. No, maybe we just got on well with most people. I didn't see the point of irking people or being a bit smarty with people, or try and rub people the wrong way. I've never sort of been that way. I don't see the point about that, because it would only backfire on you. So if we can change track, I've been on the gate at RAAF base Richmond, because a lot of married personnel were on the base. They were married quarters and stuff. So a lot of the women would come in and go in their cars, and they would actually stickers on them, and then they had 3 levels of stickers, and they'd change the sticker each year, and there was a colour for each rank, so you knew if there was an officer in the car. And often, even though they weren't in uniform, you didn't have to salute them, but we'd throw them a bit of a salute, just as an acknowledgement, I guess more. But if the girls were coming through and the women were drawing, flirting is probably not the word, but you'd give them a bit of a salute, and there'd be a big smile on their face, and even if it was an ORs or just a sergeant, you didn't have to salute them. It was just a way of being pleasant and breaking up the boredom of the day, sort of thing. And you see them coming in, do the smile and throw them a salute as they go through, and you take the number, and you just make it light-hearted of work, without irritating anyone. There'd be no point, because it would come back on you. So I never found I didn't get on with anyone in particular. I mean, some blokes could be irritating and not do the right thing, and consequently they would be pulled up short or given extra duties, or if they really, certainly back home, if they went AWOL and really disrupted things. A couple of them ended up down at Holsworth, the army base detention. They come back very quiet. I remember one bloke come back pretty quiet. They really smarten you out there. it's my last place I want to go, the detention centre. I was, polishing the inside of the shoe tins and the eyelets on your boots and having your doubling everywhere, and like they really rode the blokes. So, and those blokes, by the time if they did a hole's worth and come back, they were generally on their way out. They just didn't fit in. So you didn't follow orders. Some blokes pushed the envelope a bit and were a bit rough and ready, and because of the type of mustering you were, I think it was a bit more acceptable maybe. The ranks were more open to that, but you picked the total line, but everyone worked together. And that was the part of the whole thing, the camaraderie of being together. I think that's something I missed for a long time, not being in the service, in the Air Force. It's something I sort of missed. It's lacking sometimes in civilian life, depending on where you work, of course, and what you do. Everyone's out for themselves and not really working for a common goal. They are, but they aren't, if that makes sense. I didn't really have hassles with any of the ranks or any of the officers generally. As long as you saluted them correctly and addressed them correctly, there's no problem. Everyone did their job.
You mentioned, your various duties. One of them was doing the escorts. I'm not sure if we really got a lot of detail on that particular task and what you needed to do there.
In Vietnam.
Yeah.
Well, the two that come to mind is we went up to Bear Cat and we actually stayed overnight. Huge mess. I've never seen such a big mess, and there was actually civilians working in there serving food up and stuff. And we stayed overnight. I think I slept on the floor of some sergeant's office or come bedroom or what it was. I don't know. I don't know whether we were supposed to stay overnight, but anyway, we went up to collect wood, cement, building material. They had it up there, and I remember the Padre came up with us, and the woman on the what's the machine? Blank. Forklift. God, wasn't giving us the right stuff, and he had to sort of bargain with her and get her to pick up the right stuff and put it in the truck. And I remember coming back. I think one of us sat on the truck with our weapon as well as the escort, as well as in the truck as well, just in case someone wanted to stop us and pinch it and sell it in the black market. So we stayed overnight, and that was interesting because on the base they had these like little caravans. They did hamburgers. Couldn't believe it. So the Yanks would walk around and get a hamburger in the middle of the day. And I remember driving through Saigon and seeing some Caucasian nurses. And we were waving to them and thinking this is fantastic. Seeing some white women and all this sort of stuff. And there were women on the base who were American nurses, and actually had a couple of university campuses for blokes who were studying somehow or other. Little offices there. It was just another world. So I was seeing, as if we'd been out of the country, for a whole 6-8 months, we saw these white women, and it was fantastic, waving to them and carrying on. And they were waving back, and it was all just all in good fun sort of thing. But we went up usually to collect stuff to help build the orphanage and come back again. I think it was a 3-4 hour trip, probably, something like that. Because you're only doing maybe 50 to 60.
And you're talking about having to go into town and collect fellas, before or at curfew kind of thing. Were you involved in?
Oh yeah, everyone did that at different times. Whether the flight was on standby or generally it was done by the flight that was working that night on their 24-hour on. But if they were busy for some reason, you could be asked to go in with the driver. Sometimes we supplied the driver. Sometimes it was one of the drivers take the truck in, and we'd sit ride gunshot basically, and one up the chamber and safety on, and drive into the 5 ways, the flags, and all the blokes would clamour on, and sometimes they'd be getting chased down the street to get on. Oh, you owe me money, you owe me money. So,
and what would happen? Or we just get out of there?
They'd climb on, and you tell them to rack off sort of thing. You're not going to get it to nowhere. Diddy Mao. And then they'd stand there and abuse the law. You number 10, you number 10, I'll fix you. You buy me Saigon tea, and you not pay me. And it didn't happen very often. Blokes were just a bit drunk and been out in the town and been out visiting women and trying to go home.
Were there times where you actually had to physically remove fellas who just didn't want to leave, or
no, we didn't. No, blokes knew they had to be out of 10 because it was a bit unsafe after them because you didn't know who was around at night. And the couple of streets on the way back were pretty dark, so you wouldn't want to be walking down there on your own unless you had a weapon on you. But even then, it wouldn't be too safe. So, no, not that I'm aware of. I mean, certainly the time we went and picked up the sergeant, he was in town with his lady friend well after hours, and pretty dark and a bit spooky. So that was a bit hairy that night. When he was, I think when he was darky, I think in the Land Rover picked him up. I don't know why we're going in, but we did. Shouldn't have been in town, but we did. So, wow, it was like 11, 12.
So how was that arranged? Was that the sergeant personally making
the
the
call?
call?
I think he must have personally arranged it for the corporal to come and pick him up, or we was running late and we knew where he was for some reason. We got him. I think we picked up a couple of coconuts off a tree on the way back. Sort of funny things to be happening. And occasionally you go through the fish market, which is a smell you just don't forget. You know, if you go down to Victoria Street, Richmond here in Melbourne, if there's past that smell or somewhere where there's dried fish, you just get that flashback straight away. There, it's a shock, pungent. You get used to it, but it's first off, when you never smelt that stuff before, it's really a full-on aroma. But it was an interesting town. Anyway, they had the village behind it, and there was the VC Hill, and there was big Buddhist statues and things around there. I remember driving around one day, and there was the USS Bismarck. If that's correct? No, that's not correct. There's a huge battleship, but still, I think they've only just decommissioned it. I could be wrong, but it's been around. They've kept it for a long time. Huge. And it must have been a mile or two off in the water. And it was firing, it might have been firing the Long Island or somewhere in support, and you could still see the flame and hear it. And I've got a photo, but it looks about this small. But, I was standing on the road and watching it, and the sound was quite slow, and you could still see the flash. She was firing a gun. It was a huge battleship. Can't think of it. Gone blank.
Well, moving away from the world of vice, you were talking about the orphanage.
Yeah.
You sort of said you were involved in that, and you got to know the padre there. Can you tell us a bit more about? And you've also told us about collecting materials for the orphanage. I mean, what other involvement did you have with the place?
Oh, initially just doing the foundation work and laying the foundation, the cement sort of thing, and then not much more after that. Because they had locals involved building it as well, so putting the walls up. But we went up and collected woodwork and framework and cement for the walls and all that sort of thing. And eventually it got built. We just sort of did the base groundwork. I think we might have spent over a month, 1-2 days a week going out there. So it was just getting basic with the hard yakka stuff done. And the army had left some big cement mixers there for us and sort of prepared the ground, and we were doing some of the hard yakka. And eventually it got built, and Padre got invited back for the opening, and we got invited to go along with him. So not all of us went, but a few of us went, and it was interesting. I was quite grateful. They would roll up food and cabbage leaves and barmy bar with ice in it, and I presume it's still there. Yeah, be interesting to go back and maybe see it. Sometimes it'd be nice to go back over and just have a wander around again. It's in my list of things to do and money to save up for. But it was good to be involved with that and feel like you're contributing in one way. But the locals were happy to see us. They weren't anti us. So, as I said earlier, we'd get on the beach and it got too hot. We'd have enough, have our sandwiches and have a swim to cool off, and the local kids would come in and play with us in the water and stuff. There was no pedophile stuff. I mean, nowadays you can't smile at a child, or someone you're thinking they thinking you're checking the kid out, but it's all good fun. We're just kids mucking around the water. We're 19-year-olds mucking around the water. We're having a swim, and you were the hooked eye, and you were building the orphanage, and that's how it was. There was nothing hidden agendas operating, I guess.
How was the what was the opening like? You said you were invited to that.
I think there was a little ceremony, because I can remember parts of the ceremony, and they had a meal prepared that was all local food and rice paper stuff and food, mincemeat rolled up in cabbage leaves and cooked, and we've been told you shouldn't really eat the local food. You don't know how hygienic it is, but we were there as guests, so we ate that and their beer, and it was just a celebration of the orphanage being open. It was pretty simple. Yeah. How big was it? can't remember, like a big room. One part was like a big room, so we hadn't been involved for some time, so it was interesting to come back and see it finished up. But I think they had locals helping to build it as well. But the Army and Air Force are involved in supplying support for it as well as, you know, the products and the timber and all that sort of thing. That was good. But that was through the Padre being involved as well, getting us involved in the local civil projects, as the Yanks called it.
I'm thinking in the last tape you sort of talked about coming back.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll get onto that a bit more. Is there anything else, I mean, you'd like to sort of get down on the record as far as your time in Vietnam went?
There's not a great deal. No, I think I've covered most of the stuff. I mean, certainly coming back, I had a couple of weeks off, and I think I slept a lot of the time. Yeah, I had all these tapes. I think I've got, I don't know, 15 or 20 real tapes, which still, I probably have heard them all, but I'd often lay down at home to listen to them. I'd go to sleep. I just kept catching up on sleep. And I think at one stage I still had blank tapes, and I'd often go across to a neighbour's place. They had a proper record monogram thing and din jack outlet, and I'd plug it all in and really, you know, do some more taping or tape off a radio. I just did a lot of sleeping for a while until I went back to the RAAF base at Type and was back on duty. Didn't spend a lot of time, talking to Mum and Dad at all about it. As I said earlier, you know, it's something that maybe need to have spent maybe talking to Dad, and in time I would have talked about it, but it was something we just didn't do. Neither of us did. A bit of a bizarre situation, I guess. In fact, in hindsight, I probably, to a degree, talked to my former father-in-law more. I got him talking more about his time in New Guinea, and he had some funny stuff to talk about, some really, none of the war-y stuff, because he certainly saw action, but had some funny stuff about different situations he was in. But yet didn't do it with my father, so that was an interesting lack of communication, I guess.
Did you feel the need to do that at the time, though? In those
Probably,
stages?
well, probably not, and didn't know how to, and didn't know how to bring it up or whether they wanted to hear it. I was home on leave, and maybe they didn't know how to talk to me about it, or maybe I didn't know what to say or what to talk about. You know, I hadn't seen a lot. I've written regularly, so there wasn't a great deal to talk about, maybe, and maybe they didn't know how to converse with me or what to ask me or all that sort of stuff. You just got on with life again. Come home and picked up as much as you could and did what you had to do. Although I remember, and a lot of blokes had this sort of experience of my father, I think he took me to the local RSL for some reason, and the bloke said, you know, can you afford to join? And I looked at him and I thought, I ain't joining now. So I walked out, and blokes should join RSL now because they're just all dwindling away, and there's a lot of property and a lot of administration, a lot of groundwork's been done for the Vietnam vets and the Gulf War blokes and peacekeepers to walk in and pick it up. So there's an organisation that's already set up there for us to just take over, which we, in theory should do. But certainly a lot of blokes didn't get some good responses from some RSLs, not all. But you talk to World War II blokes and they'll say the same thing when they came back. The World War II blokes, the World War I blokes reckon the two blokes hadn't really served, which was a bit of a crazy thing when bloody war went for 5 or 6 years or something. So everyone had different experiences for different times. But now I think they're all dropping off the perch, so it's time to move in and sort of pick up the reins and keep it running if we want to have some sort of organisation that speaks one for all returned service personnel, not just fragmented and all these different little organisations running around that are at the moment, basically.
When you said you were asked, do you have enough money, or what did they mean in terms of just membership?
Well, to join membership, which I thought was a bit weird. What's that got to do with the price of fish? And I think on the form I think say are you a member of the Communist Party or some damn thing, which I think has been actually challenged now. They can't even do that. Yeah, it was just someone being a bit smarty-eyed, and being young, I took offence and thought, well, stick yourself. Different era.
But we've heard a few stories along those lines.
Oh, okay.
To be honest, so I'm just wondering what was their issue with returned soldiers and servicemen from?
Well, maybe they didn't see it as a real war. Maybe they didn't serve long enough. There was no support for it at home. Who knows what their thinking was around that whole thing. I was actually at a a delegates meeting somewhere, I won't say where, and we're joking and talking, and the bloke jokingly made the comment, "Oh, you know, you didn't really have a real war," and laughed. And I said, "I've been waiting for that one." And I could have taken offence 20 years ago, and I chose not to now because he was joking, but that's that sort of thinking process that was there. And the bloke said, "Well, yeah, you were only," his mate said, "Yeah, but you're only in intelligence anyway, you didn't do anything." So I went, "Thank you." Well, he probably did, but I don't know where that comes from. People form opinions and thoughts about things. Who knows why? It doesn't worry me. I wasn't there. I mean, I was in the Air Force for a reason. I wasn't a conscript, and I volunteered to go and did what I thought was meant to be done, and I enjoyed my time there, and I enjoyed being in the Air Force. I loved it. If I had time over again, I'd do it again. But probably stay in longer and maybe do something different if meant to be. So another lifetime sort of. So yeah, I don't take offence. I go to a RAAF meeting when I can as a representative for the Vietnam Veterans RAAF. And they're all getting old, some of the blokes. And there's some blokes from the Korean or have retired who are in there, but they're mostly older blokes. Only a couple of squadrons. And they've got this huge premises over in South Yarra they don't know what to do with because they've got to keep it running, and you know, their blokes, their members are getting older, and there's the RAAF component, and there's not many of them, so there's things to be taken up by another organisation. You know, and unless organisations get organised to do that, then that drops away and falls away and gets sold, and we lose that. You just can't buy that sort of property. It's in South Yarra, and on-site parking, it's 2 stories, it's got meeting rooms, you know, it's like all that. It's been basically waiting to be taken up by the next generation, I guess, of ex-service personnel, but they have all these infights and don't like the way they were treated when they come back, and it was seen as an officers' club, and it's not for all RAAF personnel, and it's like, well, you know, let's get over that stuff, you know, it's all kindergarten sandpit stuff. Oh, you're an officer, I'm an OR, I don't know. Well, they're all lying off. Let's utilise what's already there. Use it rather than, you know, looking for somewhere else. It's a pity to lose it.
So it sounds like this is something you're looking at doing now. It's in the future.
Yeah, in the background of things, I think the RAAF Association needs to consider RAAF Vietnam veterans, and you could even extend it to use of all Vietnam vets or all services, you know. But there's an upkeep and maintenance, so it has to be paid for, so they've got to find ways of making money as well. But, you know, the blokes are getting on and don't have the time or the energy to put into it, so it's something, I mean, has to be looked at down the road. Whether people want to or inclined to do so, I don't know.
So you're now on the committee of the RAAF, Vietnam RAAF.
Vietnam Veterans. Start again. RAAF Vietnam Veterans Association, and it's a welfare association. So we meet monthly. We're attempting to organise social stuff, but we have a newsletter with general information. But we raise money and support different welfare RAAF or even ex-service organisations to support people who are, you know, looking after TPIs or getting blokes claims. So there's money for office equipment or money towards scholarships for the children or blokes who, you know, need money. So it's a welfare organisation as such. But 200 blokes in it, so they get the newsletter. We're attempting to sort of organise some sort of social thing in the next year or two, maybe once or twice a year, and we let people know if there's other units having meetings or having get-togethers or reunions. So it's just a general information. The money comes in, there's membership, we get a newsletter, the money goes out, we authorise money spending on welfare issues. So we don't get paid, I mean, it's just a volunteer organisation. There's a museum down at San Remo, Vietnam Veterans San Remo. They purchased a hangar, so that we've donated money to that. We donated money to the Australian War Museum. We've donated money to the RAAF new memorial that was built in Canberra. So that sort of stuff where the money goes. Plus welfare work for people in general.
How long have you been involved with that?
I don't know. It's maybe come up my 3rd year, I think. Been back in Melbourne since '98. I think I got involved 99, 2000 sometime. So I'm at my 3rd year. I meet one Tuesday every month. It's called Duckboard House, an RSL sub-branch in Flinders Lane. Yeah, that's pretty old. That's been there probably the 30s. Actually, there's a lane that runs, the Blonde Lake was telling us, the lane that runs behind it, they use it a lot for commercials, and add just one of the little few lanes they can get into that doesn't have a lot of commercial activity, and it's just a lane that goes around the back of the building. You can drive around, it goes somewhere else. But yes, it's a pretty old building, and I think they've finally decided to sell it, and it'll be knocked down and then rebuilt, and then the RSL will occupy the first 2 floors, and then they'll lease out the rest, sort of thing. So yeah, it's just a welfare organisation.
So just getting back to those early stages after your return, you sort of told us about how your family or how your parents reacted or didn't really respond in any great way to the RSL thing. What about just in general, coming back to Australian society? How do you think you and your colleagues have been treated upon returning?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a difficult one, because I think the Army, from what I can understand, got more of a rough treatment because of the way they were brought back and the perception that was in the public about what was happening over there. So I didn't experience that really. I certainly, when I was travelling to work to and from on the train, in fact, saying that I don't even know how I got from RAAF base Tottenham to North Melbourne, maybe it was a RAAF bus that took us. I was aware of people being aware of me in uniform and the ribbon, but I never encountered anything. Even I guess it was maybe just a silent thing. People didn't bother saying anything or didn't do anything. I remember going away not long after. I come back with my cousin to a cousin. His sister was up in Thalia or Shepparton or somewhere up there. I might have been in Echuca. And we got chatting, and then they found out I'd been, or someone else was there from the farm, and they found I'd been in Vietnam, and they were interested, what was it like and stuff. So I sort of told them a bit, but there was no antagonism, there was more of acceptance, I guess. I didn't experience any negativity. A lot of I don't know what the other blokes experienced, certainly none that I'm aware of. I'd probably have to ask them, see if they did. But a lot of blokes tended to go back to a proper base, so you went back into the culture and back into that supportive environment, and I guess the immediate area around the base being orientated to providing support to the base, and the personnel was more supportive of that rather than being just in the middle of suburbia somewhere where you might be more obvious and therefore draw your attention to yourself and maybe some criticism as such. I didn't experience that any time. No, didn't get much of that at all. Didn't get any flack. So it wasn't bad.
So after you'd caught up on some sleep, what did the Air Force hold for you after that? You were still at a couple of years.
I'm still at a couple of years, but I was having problems with my ears. I was getting a lot of tinnitus, getting dizzy spells. I was getting bored, absolutely bored in my brain. It was just, it was shocking experience really. I guess, as I said earlier, if I'd gone back to a proper base, I might have been bored, but at least it would have been amongst the RAAF per se, and then maybe some, the education officer or something I might have been talked to about remustering. Pretty bored. Had a couple of rear-end hits in cars, and had a couple of medicals, and then they discovered that there was a bit of ringing in the ears, and yes, they confirmed that, and then there was a hearing loss, and I guess I was agitating a bit. I don't know if I wanted out. But in hindsight, if they'd remustered me or offered me something else and it was suitable, then I may have probably considered it, but it didn't happen. So they decided after a couple of hearing tests and other things and sent me off to ENTs and did all their tests that the health standard or the hearing wasn't good enough for the mustering, and they just discharged me. So I guess nowadays they certainly would remuster or retrain you. Why lose someone who's competent in other ways, but just because of one thing they got hearing loss. So, blokes have glasses and all sorts of things now. So I guess at that stage I was happy to leave, but I wasn't. Maybe I brought that on myself by pushing for the medical. So that was a bit stressful, and I actually started getting real bad, which is not pleasant, but real bad herpes cold viruses over my eyes. They just blew up out of nowhere. I didn't know what the hell they were. And I get them off and on when I'm pretty stressed. And we go to do other places, like around my nose, and they're shockers. But that was pretty stressful as well for a time. And had blood tests, and there wasn't anything nasty floating around. There was just a cold virus that I didn't know where it had come from. So once I was out, I was discharged papers, got paid out, went looking for a job. Eventually, what happened? I had a toss-up between working at Monash University's library or at Ready Mix Ashfield plant at Vermont as a dispatch clerk. And for some reason, I took the dispatch clerk job. I don't know why. So I worked there for a while, and that was okay. It was interesting. And then I was agitating to get into the public service. I saw it as a way of some sort of career, I thought, clerical. Worked at the Age for a whole month. And eventually got through the test they used to throw out every 6-12 months and got into the public service. And ended up working for the Department of Army at Victoria Barracks, of all things. It was interesting. So that was good because I could fit in with the service personnel mentality there, and once blokes sort of found out you'd served overseas or whatever, that they're more amenable to you, not you just another public servant running around delivering papers. A bit weird after I'd done that, here I am running around delivering mail. To me it was a real come down to what I'd been doing. It was like, instead of moving up, I felt like I'd moved backwards and taken a side road for a while. But I went back, because I'd finished school at 15 and a half, so I went back and did night school for 2 years in a row, 2 subjects, and got my leaving certificate, and then all ready to jump in and do matric, and went, I think I've had enough of night school for a while. Because in the public service in those days, if you upgrade your qualifications, you got paid more, basically. So I went through different departments and ended up at the government bookshop up in Melbourne, in Swanston Street opposite the museum, Australian Government Bookshop. That was good fun. Then at the aircraft factory, where I was doing nomads, and also, so it was an aircraft spares thing. Got married. A girl came from Wangaratta, and we just kept going up there, and for some reason ended up moving up there. I moved into the taxation office. They had a big PAYE section that handled all of Victoria and southern New South Wales. So I did 12 years public service eventually. Had some health problems, went and saw a naturopath bloke in the public service. I was working and said, go and see this bloke, he'll sort you out. And he did. It was and it was amazing. He had me do a cleansing diet, take some minerals, da-da-da-da-da, and it was like someone turned the light on my head and went, there's another way of looking after yourself. It was like, and I've always been interested in medicine, don't ask me why. I went, crikey, this is amazing. And coincidentally, there was a massage therapist there who knew this naturopath, and they both learnt through this school, and they were setting up a regional school in the area. So he said, you need a massage, go and see this bloke, Barry Tanker, you're pretty stressed out. And so I started getting massages and talking to this bloke, and I thought, I might go and learn massage. So that's how it started. I learned massage, and then still stayed in the public service, and then I set up a little clinic part-time with a naturopath. She was wanting someone to come in and share a room, and started doing that, a couple of nights a week on a Saturday morning, and then one thing led to another, and did a couple of courses, and then this bloke was wanting to give his practice up, but there was 3 of us who were all of a sudden took the running over of the school, so I ended up teaching it for a couple of years, sort of learned on the job, I suppose, but I sort of had a knack for it, for want of a better word. I could do it, and I knew what had to be done. So we ended up taking the school over and running it and training students, and ended up setting the first centre in Orphanage, which was interesting. Did that so I left the public service. I took 12 months off to do 3-year 12 subjects with the idea of being a naturopath, and which I didn't. I sort of took a side road and did nutritional science, but set the centre up, and then got invited to join another centre in Albury, which had float tanks in at the time, which was a quite innovative thing in the middle of, what are we talking about, 89, 90 sort of thing, float tanks in Albury. Oh, great. He was acupuncturist, so it was a little bit of a multidiscipline centre. So I left the public service after having 12 months leave without pay, and I remember finishing the study, and the boss rang up and we're chatting away. He says, well, you're coming back? And I said, oh, no, I don't think I will. I said, no, I didn't think you would. And then he said, well, you better come and sign the papers. And I said, oh, okay. I hung up and I went into this absolute cold sweat. Here I am walking away from 12 years public service, 4 weeks leave, 17% loading. I'm about to walk out in the cold and do it on my own. I went, oh, God, I don't know if I can do this. It was shocking feeling. But I did. Eventually, we walked away, and I was married at the time. We set the centre up and got up and running, and sort of just kept going on from there. kept studying and learning new skills, and then went solo for a while. Came to Melbourne, worked with a gentleman I learned did tissue body work back in '93. Came and worked here in Melbourne for a while. It just didn't happen, which was a bit weird. It's about when the recession kicked in, so things went really slid pretty low. Worked at Falls Creek for a year, for a season in '93, up at Falls Creek at Astra Lodge doing massage and bodywork stuff. That was good. Eventually went back and I thought, oh, Melbourne's just not working, so I went back to, because I was actually travelling back to Warrawong every couple of weeks to see clients, which was really a complete reverse. So I went back and set up behind a sort of a new age bookshop. They had a room there and operated there for about 4 years.